motor for use freestyle quad. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a typical 5-inch freestyle motor and we're going to compare its stator volume. So if we were to pick a 2207 motor, that would be 11 millimeter radius and 7 millimeter height, and we would get a stator volume of 2660 cubic millimeters. Now the reason that stator volume is so important is that what a motor fundamentally does is generate torque. Torque is rotational force, and a motor generates rotational force. On a quadcopter, that rotational force is used to spin a propeller, and it is used to keep the propeller spinning at a certain RPM, and it is used to accelerate the propeller when we try to make the propeller go faster. The more torque a motor generates, the more responsive the motor is going to be. In other words, the faster it will change speed when we try and make it speed up. And that's important because on quadcopters and multirotors, responsive motors are incredibly important to having it fly well. And the more torque a motor generates, the higher the maximum RPM that the motor can generate will be. The faster it'll be able to spin the prop at the top end. And of those two things, responsiveness is probably more important than top-end speed, but if you're trying to do max speed runs, top-end speed is also going to be relevant. So why don't we just get motors with the biggest volume possible? Obviously because of weight. We're going to think about weight a little bit later in the video. We're going to start with motor volume. Now, some of you aren't going to believe me when I say that torque depends on stator volume, and I'm taking that straight from the man himself, Chris Rosser. He's got a video, I'll link it down in the video description, where he derives this equation. The takeaway is that there are other things that affect the torque that a motor can generate, but for the motors that we're using, they're basically all the same, so the stator volume is the only thing that really differentiates the motors. So we've got a 2454 cubic millimeter motor compared to a 2660 cubic millimeter, technically 661 cubic millimeter motor, and that means it is about 92% the size or about 8% smaller. And that's the first meaningful result that we've derived in this video. 2505 motor is about 8% smaller than a typical 2207 motor, and a 2306 is similar in volume, is a smaller motor, and therefore it's going to generate less torque. But whether that reduction in torque is actually going to matter to you depends a lot on how you're intending to use this motor. Because if you've got a lighter weight quadcopter, then your motor can generate higher RPMs with less torque. And if you've got a lower pitch prop, then your motor can accelerate it easier with less torque. So you might start to say that this motor is better suited for a lighter 5-inch quadcopter running a lower pitch, lighter weight prop, or someone who doesn't care as much about responsiveness and top-end speed and is willing to give that stuff up, such as maybe someone who's more focused on cruising than on snappy freestyle flying. What about the shape of the motor? Shouldn't that come into play? It does, but not necessarily in the way that most people think. There's a common misconception that wider motors generate more torque and narrower motors generate more RPM, and that's just not true. This just isn't true. We have experimental and theoretical data to bear that out. The motor volume is what controls the torque. That's it. But the motor shape does have an effect, and there's two main effects. Number one is that wider motors have a larger moment of inertia because the mass of the motor is further away from the rotational axis. And that means that it takes more torque, more energy to change their speed. In other words, wider, flatter motors are less responsive than taller, narrower motors of the same volume, even though they generate the same torque because they have the same volume. And that relationship is really significant. Going back to Chris Rosser's video here, he demonstrates that there is a cubic dependence on the radius of the bell. The moment of inertia increases as the cube of the radius. So a small increase in radius gives a much bigger decrease in the responsiveness of the motor. The advantage of a wider motor is that it has a much larger surface area exposed to airflow going through the motor. And that means it's going to stay cooler. And that's not just about, like, I don't want to smoke my motors. As a motor heats up, it loses the ability to generate magnetic flux, and therefore it loses the ability to generate torque. In other words, a hotter motor will be less powerful than a cooler motor of the exact same specification. So in a situation where heat buildup is limiting the performance of the motor, shifting from a taller, narrower motor to a wider, flatter motor will give you more power. But in a situation where there is not significant heat buildup and there is enough cooling of the motors, you'll be better off with a narrower, taller motor that will have a lower moment of inertia and more responsiveness. Again, going back to Chris Rosser's amazing video, we have some guidelines here about a ratio between diameter and height. And again, that is diameter, which is the typically used spec, not radius. The ratio of diameter to height, which gives us some guidelines as to when the motor might be too tall or and might have heat buildup problem. And fortunately, the math is really easy to do for this 2505. We have approximately a 5-to-1 ratio. 25 divided by 5 is 1. 5-to-1 ratio of diameter to height. So where does this 5-to-1 ratio lie in Chris Rosser's recommendations? He says that a ratio of less than 3-to-1 can lead to hot motors, and a ratio of more than 6-to-1 is probably bad news. So we are well away from this 3-to-1 ratio. The 5-to-1 ratio means we probably have more than adequate cooling, and we're getting close to that 6-to-1 ratio that he says is bad news. Why is it bad news? Because a wide and flat motor, the flatter the motor is, the smaller the magnets are going to be, and eventually you just don't have enough mating surface between the magnet and the stator, and you just can't make power effectively. So let's recap what we know about this motor so far. It's about 8% smaller than a typical 2306 or 2207 freestyle motor, so it makes about 8% less thrust. It has a height to width ratio of about 5-to-1. When you compare that to a 2306, which is closer to about 4-to-1, or a 2207, which is closer to about 3-to-1, then it is a wider, flatter motor, which is going to have better cooling, but we kind of don't need the better cooling anyway, so we're just giving up something for nothing. Kind of starting to seem like there isn't a point to this motor. However, we haven't looked at the weight yet. The motor comes in at 31.25 grams, including the cable. And if you compare that to a typical 2306 or 2207, they usually come in closer to, let's say, 33 grams. Yes, I know there are exceptions, like somehow Heads Up FPV bent physics to make the 533 2207 motor come in at 28.4 grams. Fantastic. But this motor is about 8% lighter than a typical motor in that class. So what we really seem to be doing here is getting a motor that's lighter, giving up a little power, getting a little extra cooling to make up for the fact that the smaller motor is going to have to work harder to spin the prop. And maybe, for some people, that's going to be actually worth it. Let's do another comparison, this time between the Brother Hobby 2004 and the FPV Cycle 21mm motor, just to kind of drive these points home. I'm not going to go into all the details again, we're just going to run through the steps. But before we do that, if you've learned something in this video, would you mind going down and hitting the like button? It tells YouTube that this is a video that more people should see and really helps out the channel. I sure do appreciate it. Okay, let's compare these motors. The volume of the two motors is as shown here, and if we pull in the calculator, we can compare that as a percent, 1732 divided by 1257. We can see that the 21mm motor is way bigger, 38% bigger than its little, oh, it's just gone up by 1 millimeter would make you think. And the reason for that is that on a wider motor, adding a millimeter of height adds a lot of volume. So we have a significantly bigger and more powerful motor here. These guys aren't even in the same sort of class. What about weight? We've got 14.9 grams with short wires for the 2004 and 14.6 grams with short wires for the 2104. We don't know the exact wire length that they're both referring to, but they're pretty close to the same weight. And this is something that Kebab is somehow able to do. He makes these larger, more powerful motors, but somehow manages to keep the weight down. In other words, it sure seems like there is almost no downside to this 21mm motor, at least in terms of its stator size and volume. If we were to choose a similar KV, we would expect to just get better top-end power, better responsiveness, better performance overall, out of the 21mm motor compared to the 2004. The trade-off is going to be that the taller 2104 motor is going to have just a little bit worse cooling. And the ultimate question that we have to go back to in considering these things is, do we need the additional torque that that larger motor volume is going to give us? Go back to the concept of torque reserve. Does a 2004 motor typically have enough torque reserve, or is it kind of over-propped and struggling with the amount of torque and therefore not as responsive as we'd like it to be? And I think if we think about flying a 2004 motor on a 5-inch prop, like an Umagod 250, I think that most people would agree that a 2004 motor does not have sufficient torque reserve to get as much responsiveness as we would usually like. It's usually working a little too hard, and we could use a little bit bigger motor, assuming we can go above 250 grams. That's why he uses this undersized motor, because he needs to stand at that weight target. But if you're using a 5-inch prop, most people would say even that a 21mm motor is a little bit too small, and you would benefit from something like a 23mm motor at a minimum. On the other hand, if we're thinking about something like a Cinewhoop, those smaller props used on a Cinewhoop might be just fine on a 2004 motor. It might have plenty of torque reserve, and therefore going to this larger 2104 motor might give us additional torque reserve that we don't need with worse cooling, and therefore the 2004 might be the better choice. As I'm talking through this, I got to acknowledge that a whole lot of this depends on having an understanding of how motors are performing and whether they have sufficient volume for the prop and the weight. And unfortunately, there just aren't any guidelines. This prop needs this stator volume. I take that back. Yes, there is such a reference. I just remembered this spreadsheet, which was made by Bob Ruge, Kebab FPV, and shared with me. And one of the key pieces of information it has is suggested prop sizes for certain motor sizes. So for example, if we home in here on the 4-inch, 5-inch category, we can see, so these green rectangles are what he thinks to be an optimum ratio of surface area to volume, basically the shape of the motor, tall versus wide. And we can see here that, for example, a 2203 is a little bit big for a 4-inch, right? But a little bit small for a 5-inch prop. But a 2203 and a 2204 has what he considers to be the optimal shape, the optimal surface area versus volume. Whereas a 2004, we can see that he considers it to be pretty undersized for a 5-inch and a little bit too wide and not tall enough. Now, that's just his opinion. Obviously, a lot of people use 2004 on a lightweight 5-inch for various reasons, but it is a way to sort of get you in the ballpark of, for the prop size that you're looking for, what might be a somewhat appropriate prop size. If somebody said, hey, I'm going to run a 2806.5 motor on a 5-inch prop, you could say, that's probably too big of a motor. It probably has way more torque than we really need, and is going to be heavier than we need it to be. See how that works? I'll put a link to this down in the video description if you want to download it. Now, at this point, what you're probably thinking is, Bardwell, there's a whole lot of characteristics you think about when you're shopping for a motor that you're overlooking here. And yeah, I do confess, I'm focusing just on the size and shape. But one of the questions that you might be having right now is, if you go to that larger motor, will you get shorter flight time because it's going to suck your battery down more? It turns out that's a hard question to answer, because if a motor is undersized, it will draw extra current and make less power. And in that case, going to a larger motor will give you more efficiency and longer flight time. But if a motor is oversized, then it'll waste power and you'll get shorter flight time. I did an interview with Chris Rosser, Ryan Harrell, and Bob Ruge, Kebab FPV. We took 2 hours of my normal live stream slot and had one of the most stimulating conversations about motors that I have ever had. If you missed it when it first came out, I'm going to put a card on screen. I highly recommend this. If you made it all the way through this video, you are going to love that video. definitely check it out. If you value the content that I'm making here, would you also consider joining my Patreon for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it? It's totally up to you. You can support me. If today's the day that I've earned it, click that link and go sign up. If I haven't earned it yet, I'm going to keep making content. You keep watching the content, and hopefully that day will come. Happy flying.
I've been getting a little tired of working at my desk lately, but taking my whole setup to a cafe is such a hassle, lugging around my laptop, cables, and especially my heavy tablet. As a solution, XPpen sent me their new Artist 12 3rd Gen. It's compact, super cute.
Alright guys, so in this video we're checking out this Mobula 6 toothpick conversion, and I basically just took in the FPV HX100 SC frame, and that's what this is here, 2mm frame, 100mm motor to motor, and with 65mm. These are the jump fan 65mm props, this is the V2s, and I have these Eachine 1102, 13,500 kV motors for 1S. Happy Model makes these exact same motors as well. I'll link them down in the description. These are actually from the Novice, Eachine Novice 1, but you can get these Eachine versions or you get the Happy Model versions, it doesn't really matter. These come on these plugs, as you can see here, and this is literally the Mobula 6 parts here, right here from, I just basically unplugged the motors and took the flight controller off with the same pod, and I know everyone's going to be asking me where I got this. This is a remix of a Thingiverse file from Dave C, and it's up on my Thingiverse account, so I'll link down in the description. And I just basically put bigger holes here for these M2 nylon screws that go through, and added these grommets, bigger grommets here that I had. So you can see all the flight controller board. And just to make these holes a little bit bigger, I just use a soldering iron. It's hard to tell, but I just make them a little bit bigger. You don't make them too big, obviously, but just enough so that the threads of the screw can go into it and hold the canopy on. And I wanted more camera angles, so I made another hole here. If you put it in this hole here, then you get less camera angles, so you can just put the hole wherever you feel like, get the camera angle you want, and it's pretty easily adjustable. So basically, I just took the pod off of the Mobula 6. It's got the flight controller, video transmitter, and camera all here. You can see I have my VTX antenna mod here still, and I decided to put the stock SPI antenna back on since my little experiment didn't really work. You can see that previous video from about a week ago. That's pretty much it. Pretty simple mod. Just get this frame, get these motors, and you can fly this on 1S on these props. And I know that people are going to ask how this compares to the HX100 SC that you can buy pre-built. This is here. And it's got similar motors, 1102s, 13,500 kV. So you can also go with those motors as well, and just go with the Mobula 6 parts. But basically, the difference is the weight, and I think that does improve performance. So we got 29 grams, or 21.1 grams for the HX100, and 26.5 grams for the Mobula 6 conversion. And that, I think that 2.6 grams there, I guess, it does make a difference. I am flying it on this 1S battery as well, which is I think a better 1S battery than the Beta FPV one, even with the BT 2.0 connector. Even this one has a PH 2.0 connector. This battery seems to be better, more power and better flight time. So this is the Nitro Nectar Gold from Navy Drone. I'll link those down in the description as well. And I did make a modification to my battery plug here. So the battery goes in like this, and I took this one off The original battery plug or wires went off the side here, and that will get in the way of the prop. So I basically have the black wire coming out right there on this side, and the red wire is a little longer coming around to the other side.
Something more friction based on. Please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it. Comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find it, wherever it is, click on that little bell icon. It'll tell you when I'm uploading videos. So it's always an exciting time when we see something from a Happy Model, because I'm enjoying the sort of stuff they're bringing. I have to say, the Southfly, as much as I loved it and the craziness of it, it came with a couple of really dodgy parts I didn't like, and that was mainly the VTX and the camera, which was really hard to fly where I do over trees and stuff. I took a long time replacing bits of that and getting it up to spec, which I really like now. And a couple of people sort of commented, basically you've upgraded it to the Lava X, which is this one. So the Lava X isn't saying it's a toothpick or anything, it's just saying it is a 100mm micro quad, which I think is the right way to go, because perhaps trying to go and saying this is a toothpick means you're going absolute sort of super lightweight in every way, and if you don't want to stick to the rule set, not that there is a really prescribed one, and want to do your own thing, then don't call it that, just call it a micro quad. It's what most of these are really anyway. Anyway, let's open up and see what we've got here. Couple of sheets of instructions. This is for the receiver. I actually asked if I could get hold of the proper XM Plus version, because one of the things I'm doing every time I get one of these little quads, which comes with SPI receiver as standard, is saying I can't deal with the range on this, it's too low, I'm going to put a decent receiver in. So this time I said, can I have a decent receiver out the bat? And yes, I got one. We've got some instructions, nice and in colour stuff there. We have got some HQ props and a prop removal tool and another canopy. It's quite interesting. This was spec'd to come with Emax Avon props, but there seems to be some issue having as many Avon props that they wanted. So some people that order this are going to get the Emax Avon props. Some people are going to get the HQ props. I've got HQ. There's nothing wrong with HQ, good props. So are the Avons though. I don't know what's best. I'm hoping they're at least of a similar performance. Then got the actual quad itself in this little bubble wrap bag. Probably just all about in the box a little bit, but let's have a look. It is, yes, significantly different to what we saw in stuff like this. It feels thicker. It's more, there's more of it. It's really quite a substantial model, which is a nice thing. And obviously these props are going to be a lot stiffer than those little bi-blade things. These are 1103 7000 kV motors, so good for 2S and 3S, but not 4. The other things I'm really liking about this is the camera. Remember how I said that camera in the original Southfly was very bad? And what I actually ended up putting in here is the Runcam Nano Racer, which is quite an expensive camera, and I was interested to know what the basic Runcam Nano camera would be like. And lo and behold, this has got the original Runcam Nano in it, so I'll be able to find out. I'm hoping the camera is up to the same sort of quality as the Nano Racer was. The thing you don't get in it is the ability to go in with an OSD and change settings around. The VTX as well goes up to 200 milliwatts. I think we'll have to put some sort of zip tie or something on that just to keep that flopping around. You've got a sort of the normal, I'm going to call this the Whoop stack. This is the, I can't remember how big it is, but it's the sort of diagonally facing thing. And the XM Plus here is just sort of dumped on the end. Again, we might have to do something with these antennas just to stop them magnetically being attracted to the props there. That would be quite bad, wouldn't it? Camera comes set at quite an angle there. That's at least 45 degrees. That's sort of crazy flying. But 2.1mm lens, so that might have to come down slightly for a sensible landing, but we will see. So I'm hoping it's going to be a little nice speed demon, something you can really go crazy amongst the trees with and stuff. and be able to see. The battery strap, I'm not a huge fan of still. It's one of these things where you sort of just pass it through the middle. They
I've got to do something.
things having come back to it, which I thought was a bit odd. But what I did, I had my OSD set up, and I thought, you know, I'm better put it in the middle of the screen at least. And so if I look at that, this is what it looks like. So it's not as good as having that whole wide screen, but you know, it'll do. It's in the centre at least. The other thing I said I wanted to check out is the output power. So if I go down to transmit power, it's currently at 25 milliwatts, and I kind of expected it to know what it was connected to. But at the moment it still goes through all the way up to 1200 milliwatts, which I know this thing can't use. So I'm not sure what these power levels equate to. I'll have to try and ask WalkSnail and see what answer I get there. In my last video I said that WalkSnail came back to me and said that the Zoom tab isn't implemented yet, but I had a comment here from Watches 2007 saying the Zoom tab's for diagnostics mode, and if you go all the way down to 10%, it will show diagnostics, which it does. Look at that, it's secret debug mode. I think, reading between the lines, what WalkSnail's saying, it's not implemented as in zooming the screen, but yeah, you can get to a little secret debug menu, which may be handy for some people. It's not particularly useful for me for now, so I'm going to change that back. And yeah, we're looking good. We've got everything set up, and we've got a picture. It's just a question of thinking, how can I put the batteries in there now? Battery-wise, I haven't got a great deal of 2S batteries with XT30 connectors, and those I do, well, that goes in okay, but I'm not particularly convinced with these big FPV batteries. I mean, that's pretty tight, but that's a little bit puffy. That one is, yeah, that's okay. The GNB ones are going to be good, but that 300 high voltage one is very tight. And this 451 that only has a JST connector is, no, not going to happen. So then I thought, oh, I could use this series connector and then get a couple of 1S batteries, stuff them in, and that'd be good. But get one in okay, but number two, yeah, I mean, I can just about do it here, where my finger's nowhere near the quad, but that is distorting, and I don't think that's going to be easy to do when in the quad. The other thing I had, back when I used to fly the first load of sort of little 2S quads, and when Toothpicks came in, it was very much 3S. I've got these guys, a couple of these, I've got a couple of these, and these are larger. They have JSTs, and you might be thinking, well, you can't put enough through them. Here's an adapter, that makes it a bit unruly, doesn't it? But I figure it's what I might try first. So rather than go ahead and screw one of these in, and what I've done is I've just put this battery strap around there. It's a little bit big and bulky. I couldn't find one that I was particularly happy with. I've cut this down slightly, but that will fit one of these on okay, and well, fly. I just don't know how good these batteries are going to be. They're probably about 8 years old. So I thought, you know what, let's charge one up, charge one of these, maybe charge one of these, give them a quick hover in the garden, make sure they hold up to trouble before we go out and actually try and fly. So here's the quick flight in the garden. Now, I didn't give it any sort of throttle range in terms of minimising the throttle, as it's 2S, and I thought, I know, I'll put it in angle mode just to keep it easy. But of course, I'm not used to flying in angle mode, and the camera's got quite a tilt on it, so it didn't sit quite right, so it was a little bit of a handful. But you know, it was small enough just about to take in the house and mess around. yeah, the only thing I would have done is put a different throttle range in, move the camera angle a bit more flat for doing this sort of thing, and it would have been better. But yeah, it was okay. It worked well. The signal held up fine. Got a nice picture, and in the end we got about 4 minutes or so out of the battery, which is, you know, just gentle here, but I figure that'll do for taking it out. Hello, haven't been to this site for a while, just lets me fly up and down. It's about a 25-minute walk from home. We're ready to test, except I got here thinking I'd packed everything and I've forgotten the little adapter cable that lets me use the JST batteries, which are most of my decent batteries, so I might have to do a walk home, but I've got a couple of batteries, which I think are the worst ones, just to get a feel for how it just flies in the open. So we'll check that out and see what happens. So my plan here was to fly down to the end, which I've done on some analog quads before, and then come back just to see how the picture holds up. I still wasn't sure what power I'm using on the VTX. That's a real issue. I mean, I whacked the power up on the goggles to like 1,000 milliwatts, thinking that would translate into at least 350, but it's hard to tell. But I did notice we are in Smear City here. We've got the very sort of dense leaves and dense grass, and yeah, I was getting some hits there, both on the picture going very bad. You can see the bitrate drop and then the latency stretch out. This felt to me like we just had these little sort of third of a second little freezes, which is a bit frightening. You can't really see it on the DVR because what the DVR does is sort of skip when it goes really bad. It just goes to the next bit. But yeah, we had nasty picture and latency right down the end of that bit. So that was an interesting thing. And yeah, it's really fighting with the detail. Once we get really dense amounts of detail, and we've got, you know, millions of blades of grass and lots of leaves, it seems like the compression algorithm just says, I know, let's just colour this green because there's too much detail here. And I'm uploading this in 4K to give, you know, YouTube the best chance of compressing it. So I'm hoping that'll come off. And it's really weird because sometimes you see perfect detail and in other bits it kind of just smears the colour together. That was a quick blip of the throttle, and I do notice that at full throttle we get some oscillations from the squad. It's not something I was doing very often because I've got very bad batteries, but yeah, it's definitely there. What I'm doing here, I was just testing things like dives and, you know, some light acro just to make sure it handles it. There wasn't any yaw washer or anything. And, you know, it's not really a traditional whoop, so that was absolutely fine. And yeah, it held together okay. I was just a bit perturbed by losing a bit of signal as I went down the end there, and I don't like, you know, whereas some of it smears and some of it looks really good. That's, well, I'd just like it to be a bit more consistent. But the actual quad handled pretty well. Here's a couple of external fly past shots. I did also try upping the bitrate to 50 megabits per second, but I still had sort of much the same smeary stuff, so that didn't seem to help an awful lot there. I was interested to see how the recording to the internal memory on the VTX looked. This is in 1080p 60, and I was interested because it's still, you can see little compression artifacts even though this is recording directly. It's not trying to, you know, compress it and beam it to the goggles. This is definitely a torture environment for this. It's, you can just see little bits of artifacts and stuff that's not quite right. I hope this you can see that on YouTube. I can certainly see it on my screen. Okay, so initial impression wise, it flies pretty nicely. If you go full power, there's some oscillations there, so the tuning's not perfect, but cruising around is very, very smooth. The problem with the picture, maybe it's like everything's green and very dense. We've got dense amounts of leaves and grass, and that seems to really smear. When I went down the end there, the latency jumped up, so the bitrate must have dropped. I wasn't watching that one, and I had some like a bit sparse there. One of the problems is, of course, I can't tell what power I'm on. I don't know what it is. In the goggles, I still get the normal 25, 200, 500, 1000, 1200, but I know this thing does 350 max, so how do I know I'm on 350? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to have to go home, get the adapter, try it in some different places, which isn't quite so speckled with green. But yeah, aside from that high oscillation thing at very high throttle, it was fine in dives and doing little flips and rolls and stuff. I just need better batteries. So back in a sec. So I actually decided to come back the next day. It was another decent day, and I charged up all the batteries and took the right adapters this time. And this is the sort of the woods I fly, and you might recognise this if you've watched some of my other videos. It's where I take the sort of little whoops and toothpicks when I want to fly outside. And what I'm doing first off is I'm just having an exploratory little fly just to make sure things hold up. And I have to say, this is a world of difference to yesterday. It just seems that having some different colours and without the very sort of dense green everywhere, the compression doesn't have a problem. We're getting a beautiful picture. You can really see it's HD now in the goggles, and I'm flying along having a great time. And we seem to get great bit rate, low latency all down here, so this is all great. For some reason I've lost the range on this bit. I think it's what happened when I changed the bit rate to 50. I actually find that quite useful. If you've noticed it down the bottom before, it's fairly accurate. I've checked it against the GPS, and it's a good way of being able to find your quad if it goes down. You just look at how far away it is, as long as it's still on and transmitting, and you can sort of look at the goggles and say, you know, I'm getting closer, I'm getting further away. And on a quad like this, where the D-Shot beeper is pretty quiet, you'll need to be very close to it before you can actually hear those little beepers. Anyway, this is going well. I'm finding all the nice little lines through the trees. The only thing I'd mention about it, and I can't work out if it's purely a power to weight ratio thing, is when I'm going into sort of big turns and stuff, I know it seems like it has a lot of inertia, and I'm thinking these are quite big batteries for the size. I'm flying 450s and 550s, and is it perhaps the case that I'm more used to a toothpick being a 3S, and the amount of throttle you have there means you have sort of an instant turn? It's perhaps that in combination with the battery being a bit heavy and not so much power. So perhaps the power to weight ratio is not suited for doing really quick explosive stuff, but just cruising around doing, you know, fun things around the trees is pretty nice. You just got to be careful on the cornering. I think this is something to get used to. All quads fly a little bit different. This one you need a little bit more oomph when you want to do a very fast turn. You need to really throttle back out of it. Now, I did have a bit of an odd instance here with going through this tree. You might recognise this tree. I always use this tree to do little tricks through. And what happened was I decided to go through it and do a front flip. And it's the most bizarre thing. I literally got halfway through the flip.
So wild.
The
Damn.
image froze completely. I got telemetry lost even before the quad hit the ground, and I had a complete disconnection. It was the most curious thing. It's like I've hit the most perfect null. I mean, I am sideways onto the quad, but I've got no problem flying all around it everywhere, except when I went over, and it literally, not only did my image just completely freeze, you'll see the final frame just coming up here. This also caused the internal recording on the VTX to corrupt. So I thought, this is impossible. I'll do that again. Let me just make sure I can do it, you know, get straight back on the horse and stuff. So I was like, okay, coming up, going over, froze again. And you can see when it comes back to life, it's completely lost all signal, which I couldn't really explain. So I thought, I know, I'll go the other way and front flip it. Then I know I've got the signal, and then I decided not to do it correctly. So, you know, just to make sure I didn't get in my head about it, I thought, let's try it again. Let's get this done. 4th time lucky. Yay. I don't know if that was worth it in the end, but, you know, we got through it. But, yeah, I'm loving this in the woods. Aside from that really weird thing, I can, you know, line up on anything. There's still a question of, you know, ghost branches can be a problem because you've still got the contrast issue. You can see the branch, but when it's against a bright sky, it may still disappear because of the way the lighting and aperture of the camera works. It can kind of be disguised there, but yeah, everything's working really nice in the woods. So then it was really just a case of putting more batteries through it. I did a bunch more batteries in the woods. I went out to this place where I could have a slightly different view, and this is sort of over stone along the side there. Again, you can see there's a bit of a smear on the stone as you go further out, but as you're in close, which is better, that kind of looks okay. I was trying to do some tree dives here, and I must admit to being slightly out of practice, and the quad didn't quite want to fly how I wanted it to, which is normally I throw it up to the tree, like I fall off and I come down. This seemed to move forward a bit. I don't think I quite had my angles right, but yeah, flying it along here was pretty nice. Again, the signal holds up really nicely. I don't get any sort of little bitrate fall-offs or latency spikes, which I liked. Again, we're not going too far in that first section where it was just trees and grass. It was also a bit more distance I went there, but yeah, this is looking good, isn't it? I've got absolutely no complaints. I'm enjoying flying around and just having a good old time. I did a few batteries here, and the idea was I noticed this is a bit more accessible and I could get to the sort of edge of the trees, and I thought let's try doing some tree dives. It wasn't going very well. I think I'm sat at practice here. The battery's screaming at me, and it's pretty windy up there. This is a very little quad, and when you take it up high, you really do notice the wind having more an effect. It's a little bit more shaky. It's a fairly smooth flying quad, but yeah, in the wind it's like, whoa, this is something else. But yeah, aside from the fact I was pretty out of practice at tree dives and stuff, it's going really nicely still. I'm having a good fun time. I like the fact you can pretty much just take this thing to, like, you know, where there's a few trees around it and have a pretty good time. So I thought what a good idea might be is to go back to the problem area from the previous day, but put focus mode on, which I hadn't tried before. And the Walks Now people told me it was like GTI Focus, but more radical. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. So this is focus mode on auto, and what that means, it will kick in if there's a problem. So I thought, if I go the same way I went yesterday, I should hit a problem and I should see it. And my goodness, look at that. It's like it turned your phone from landscape to portrait almost. However, the good thing about this is, although it's pretty ugly on the sides and stuff, you still get the middle section retained. What is different about this, and it won't be evident from the DVR, because as I said, on yesterday's flight, we had a sort of third of a second that was just sort of frozen, and I was like, what's going on? Because that feels like a very long time when you're flying. On this, on the worst section, there was this tiny judder, but I felt like control was retained, and there was no actual problem in the picture. So if you're in a particular problematic area, I would recommend putting on. For everyday flying, if you haven't got a problem, I'd say no, don't do it, because you certainly do notice that, you know, the sides have become complete pixels. But I think if you're going to do it, you might as well do it like that. It's kind of like, let's throw away everything at the sides, let's concentrate in the middle so we know where we're going, and go with that. So yeah, that was pretty good. As far as the HD recording goes, which you're seeing some of now, it's absolutely fine. It's 1080p 60. It obviously doesn't have any sort of digital noise or artifacts that you would have got in the goggles, which is quite nice. I would say it's, you know, you couldn't use this as a cinematography drone. It's not going to be as good as sort of getting sort of GoPro standard, but it's certainly good enough for sharing on YouTube and just, you know, showing your friends what you were doing there. I think one thing to mention about the internal memory is it's only 8 gig. So on that day of flying where I went through about 6 or 7 batteries, by the end of the day I was almost full. I only had 1.5 gig left, and you can just see that. If I show you this picture here, you can see that the S009 and S011s were the 2 corrupted flights from that loss of signal there. But yeah, make sure you clean this out, empty out the memory, ready to go again for the next time if you intend to use this. Well, this little guy is fun. I still can't believe in there is a digital VTX camera, and it's even got Express RS. This is a great little quad for flying anywhere, and I particularly think it's suited for smaller environments, through the woods, in the trees, through the little lanes like that. You put this in a big field, because it's not, you know, super fast, it might just feel like you're sort of chugging along a bit, but it's a good way of getting used to it, I guess. It also holds up pretty well to a crash. I crashed it a lot. I don't think I showed you them all. I hit trees and grass, and when I was taking off sometimes I fell over. All I've got here is a couple of little bent props which I might replace, because that later footage was a little bit wobblier than the initial footage. But again, it is so light, even with like a 450, 550 battery, this thing is pretty light. I should weigh it, shouldn't I? I forgot about that. Okay, quad plus this 450 battery, 80 grams. So even if you went a larger battery, you wouldn't be going anywhere near into the 250 grams category. It's pretty light. Are there any annoyances with it? Sure, it's very fiddly to get the two cables in you need to get the footage off. You have to get that tiny little USB cable in there. The right angled adapter is always like, you feel like you're going to break it. That is just a thing with these sorts of quads though. Power to weight ratio feels like a little bit off compared to a 3S toothpick. You just need to give it more oomph in the turn in order to, come around, as it's going to drift out a little bit more. That is kind of getting used to it. This is not something you're going to really fling around really quickly, but it's great fun for just sort of cruising around and hitting little gaps around the woods through little trees. But be careful about going forward like that over the Y-shaped tree. I don't know where it happened. It's another question for Walks Now. I did ask them about how the power in this relates to what's on the goggles, because obviously I want to know if I change my goggle power, am I on 25 milliwatts, am I on 100, how do I know I'm on 350? They haven't replied. Damn you. Partnership Walks Now, remember? Anyway, hopefully they'll come back with that and I'll know what I'm doing, and hopefully they might update the firmware so the goggles actually talk to the VTX and then you get the proper different options you can use. I think we live in a general hope that, the firmware will develop and improve. I still want to get rid of the smears. I go on about the smears because it's stuff you see. You can see bits of like really high definition footage behind a bit of smear, because that is slightly different. Like it's big pronged grass in front of a smear of grass, because that's different. It seems if you fly it in more variety places, it does better, like a variety of different colours and textures and stuff. If you're all like, I'm all grass and trees, then it's like, this is just green and does that. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, this little quad, great fun, and I'll be flying it a lot more, because I want to do more testing on the Walks Now system in general. And with this little thing, I can just walk to those woods and fly it around. And I've now got a torture test to do as well by flying down that long corridor to see what will happen as the firmware changes and stuff like that. But this little guy has been the Happy Model Baseline HD and was very kindly supplied by Gaff at your FPV. And don't forget, especially if you're in the UK, check him out. There'll be links down below where you can get hold of this and other stuff on his store. Anyway, I hope in the meantime that's been helpful, and I will catch you next video. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.
Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at the Happy Model Bassline. Yeah, Bassline, not baseline like baseball, B-A-S-E, but B-A-S, bass, like fish. And Happy Model has a habit of naming their microquads after fish of all various sorts. The Mobula is probably the most famous of fish names for their quads. And I want to start off with just one little point here. Many of you will be asking me about how does this compare to the Rocket Race. I will answer that in this video. Continue watching for that answer, because it's more than just a one-liner. It comes with 1103 10,000 kV motors. The all-in-one flight controller is the X12 5-in-1, so that does include a 400 milliwatt VTX. You see my little cube antenna down there, that's Express LRS. This does come in FrSky, FlySky, and without a receiver as well. And I forgot the props. They're the Gemfan Tri-Blade 2023 props. The camera is the Caddx Ant, not the light version because it's got the screw hole right there. XT30 for our battery connection. We can see here we've got a 3D printed battery mount, which I typically tear these off, but I didn't in this case. The two pieces of foam here go on either side and give us a little bit of additional battery security. In the accessory bag, I did get an extra battery tray, and I believe it is the same size. Looks the same size to me. Also in the accessory bag, a little screwdriver, and extra set of props. Extra set of that foam that goes by your battery tray. Prop remover. We've got some gummies, some extra screws, some really long screws there too, and some nylon nuts. The silver screws that came in mine are substantially longer than stock, so that's a bit curious. Also in my box is this extra canopy, which this is made for the old SD recording HD cameras, so that's a bit curious as well. Also in the box, 2 sheets of stickers. That's the Crux 3, and this is the box. But it doesn't really fit down inside with the battery tray on the bottom. And it ships without the battery tray attached, so you have to do that work yourself. It weighs just a touch under 40 1/4 grams. I flew it on this RDQ branded GNB 525 2S battery, and with that battery it comes in just a touch under 70 grams. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting just about 90 millimeters. First, a slight confession. Some of you have seen part of this flight already. If you saw the HD0 goggle review, yeah, this was in there. I've also updated my flight background to reflect the fact that I am using the HD0 goggles. One of the questions I get pretty regularly after that review is, are they going to be your daily goggles? And if I'm not flying DJI, yep, they are. That's the short answer there. So if you're interested in the HD0 goggles, currently pre-order. Price could come up though. Of course, you know they had that $105 savings for pre-order, kind of trying to encourage pre-order. I mean, obviously, I think that's the sales tactic behind those. You can check out that video, or I'll put a link down in the video description to the HD0 goggles and their website. Remember, it does not come with an analog module. You have to buy that additionally. Also, it doesn't come with an analog receiver, just like most goggles outside of, well, I guess most Fat Shark goggles, because SkyZone includes them, and then the budget goggles also include them. So at any rate, back to the bass line. I think when you'll notice some of the harder turns, especially in the sound, if you're listening closely, if you can drain out my voice out of your ears, that there is a little bit of a tune correction I think we can make. Don't get it twisted, don't get it wrong. It's not terrible. It's just not Happy Model's best tune that they've put on one of their quads. There's just I think it might be just a little bit too high at D. Of course, I didn't tinker with that. Oftentimes people will see videos 2 months later and say, did you change the tune? No, I didn't. Quite honestly, I don't revisit too many of these quads outside of an occasional flight, and definitely it's really rare that I revisit them, say, 3 to 6 months later. And retuning isn't something that I enjoy, so it's not something I do. I would rather build something else that I've kind of had my eye on, or just take one of my favorite quads out, which is the TKS Rocket Race from Jack's 3D Printing. Link down in the description as well. That is my favorite 2S flyer. But this flies well, but not as well as my TKS Rocket Race 2S. But this has an advantage in the fact that it has a larger motor and a larger motor dimension. And I think, and I kind of alluded to that in my intro, I bet Happy Model has got an HD edition of this probably cooking, and it'll probably be coming out soon. So if you're flying Walksnail or DJI, or maybe that canopy's in there for O3 inclusion. I don't have O3 goggles, or the goggles too, so if that's the case, I don't know if I'll be even seeing those or not. But it was a little bit odd to get that extra canopy in there, knowing that the TKS Rocket Race really doesn't have enough room for that second layer stack. But that was the end of our flight for the most part. I found in 525 is pretty much our sweet spot for being able to get a pretty solid, at least 2.5 minutes of pretty good flight time. In this case, I got almost 3 minutes at 2 minutes and 52 seconds, and you can see there on the left, our battery is at 3.58 volts per cell. Okay, so I didn't get to it during the flight, but so a lot of people will ask me the comparison between this. This is the TKS Rocket Race. This is my favorite analog micro quad, and it's one I've got like 5 of these because I just don't want to ever be without it, because it is a lot of fun. I know it's not for most people, or it's not for some people that prefer HD. So if you want HD on yours, the best recommendation I can have to get something like this is either buy something like the Bassline frame and stack up your HD. Probably Walksnail. I don't know how the Link or Vista would handle the extra weight. You could go naked, that would make it a whole lot better, but I've flown some of those and didn't really. I'm a performance snob. I'm looking for the performance that I like. But at any rate, I'm getting along in the tooth here already. So this is my favorite quad, and I think most people who follow the channel closely will ask me about the Bassline or Bassline and the Flywoo Nano 20. I would say these are kind of equal, and they're both about 10% off in both directions of the Rocket Race. So they're not quite there. I would say they're 90% there in one way or another. This one, in my estimation, has got a little bit too much weight, and this one, not enough motor. speaking of the motors, the 1002 motors, they work in this.
上都没你这种人，就连我有这种搞笑性质的人，我根本
我帮你
没办法。
付学费，
我是放轻松。
好不好？我帮你付学费，你去上。
答案跟大家分享，我考试考过了，
哦，恭喜！
哦，恭喜！
对
哎，观众不知道你考什么？
对，
很难
不知道其实很难吗？
我觉得很难。
对我来说很难啊，EMT one，紧急救护员的考试，上了2个礼拜的课，
哦，
全天的，早上9点至6点，下午6点。
好久。
听说要念超多书的嘛，
是
然后还有一些操作的过程是不能错的。
对，主要是我这个年纪吧，而且我的个性可能也就很容易把它当真那样子。
什么意思？
就我看到那个假人，我会觉得我敢是真人。完了，
这不就是假人的目的吗？你就当真人救啊！
没有啊，
状况很棒啊。
你什么时候实习？那你实习怎么办？
实习我就。
4-in-1 ESC are placed in the center of the frame. The brushless motors are simply connected to the 4-in-1 ESC, therefore it's pretty simple to replace the motors. Here on the right side we can see the SD card slot of the Calyx Baby Turtle camera board. The camera starts automatically recording by default when an SD card is inserted. Now we take a closer look at all the parts that are coming with the Happy Model Lava X. We get replaceable 4 prop guards in order to transform the Happy Model Lava X toothpick into an HD whoop. For this we also get some longer motor screws in order to attach the additional prop guards. We also get some spare parts and tools that are needed to replace the canopy for the whoop transformation. The Lava X also comes with 2 Tetris 3S 450mAh batteries, a Calyx camera controller board for changing the video settings, and spare propellers. Here you can see the Happy Model Lava X with the additional prop guards. Now the prop guards are in the field of view of the Calyx Baby Turtle FPV and HD camera, and that's probably the reason why we also get a special canopy for completely transforming the Lava X toothpick into a HD whoop. I definitely prefer the toothpick version for doing my first test flight. The Happy Model Lava X is pretty powerful and it's a lot of fun to fly this drone even in freestyle maneuvers. The quad probably fits for beginners as well as advanced FPV pilots. The HD footage of the Calyx Baby Turtle looks pretty good for a drone of this size. Unfortunately, it's a bit shaky, but maybe it's possible to enhance the smoothness by using 3 or 4 blade propellers. What do you think about the Happy Model Lava X HD? Enjoy the rest of the flight and tell me your thoughts in the comments below.
It's amazing. G'day, Shu from UAV Futures here, and today, well, big apology to whoever I was going to review. I had another video lined up, but I've just been out flying this all morning with Grumpy Trevor, and as soon as I flew, I was like, I need to go home right now, make this video for you guys. It is reminding me so much of when we first saw the Mobula 7 from Happy Model. We came back and people's minds just exploded with what little crafts can do. Today, we're back with the Happy Model Lava X, and let me tell you, this thing is easily the best one of these little micro, ultralight, super light, whatever you want to call these types of beefed up micro drones under 100 grams, and it makes your toothpick look like absolute garbage. I know so many people are going to be getting triggered. Stuart, I've flown this, you don't know what I've done to my sail fly. Whatever your toothpick is, however you've done it, I'm sorry, this thing is better than it. So what we're going to do, we're going to stick this on the bench, this little absolute pocket monster, and you can see why so many people have been just freaking out over this thing when it comes out. You can tell I'm excited. It's under $100 and it is the best one I have ever flown. So what we're going to do, we're going to break it down, look at the text and the specs of what makes this thing such a cool little craft, especially for the price, which is ridiculous, and how much power it has. And my favorite thing, it is so smooth. When you are flying this, it just... Okay, put it this way. If they said to me, you can tell I'm excited. If they said to me, Stuart, you can't ever fly a big 5-inch again, all you can ever fly is one of these little things, that would be enough. I'd be like, okay, that's fair enough. I can still have an amazing time with this thing. So what we'll do, put it on the bench, break it down, look at the text and the specs, the really cool stuff that this thing's doing. I've also got one to give away, so put your comments down below and all that sort of stuff. I want to hear about what you think about the Lava X, and definitely wait till you see the flight footage. But let's do it. Go through the text and specs, and then the big one will go out to the field, and you'll see what I'm carrying on about. You'll see what Grumpy Trev thinks as well. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be absolutely gobsmacked when you might even be a bit disappointed if you've already bought another toothpick or something else out there when you can see just what this thing can do. But let's do it. Jump in, look at the nitty gritty as a bit of an overview, stick it on the scales, and hopefully you guys can see this. It's coming in at around the 50 gram, that's a bit in the way there, that Velcro strap, but it's coming in at 52 grams, 0.61, and it's made to rock a little 3S pack, which is about 23 grams. So you're looking at between 70 to 80 grams, depending on your batteries, all that sort of stuff, total weight. So if you want a little screamer, that sounds inappropriate, but if you want a little quad that's screaming around, and it's coming in under the 100 gram mark, there's never been a better one. And something I really love too, and this is going to also be apparent in the flight footage, when this thing is ripping around, it is so not obnoxious. It's not making tons of noise, pushing out heaps of air. It sounds almost unnervingly quiet for the amount of power that's coming out of this thing. It is just, I guess the tune is all about putting out the thrust, not making any noise. It just sounds great. It screams through the sky, but you're not going to be upsetting people. You could fly this anywhere, and people are, oh yeah, it's just like a nice little quiet thing that is going a million miles an hour screaming past. So I love the amount of sound this thing makes. Some of the other cool features, it's also got built-in DVR, so you can put a little SD card in there, record your flights without getting into the static and all that sort of stuff. No, it doesn't do HD, but what it does do well, it's an ultralight little flyer that just screams around with a beautiful tune and has some rock steady full-size receivers and stuff like that, because you get so many different receiver options. So I think you can get TBS ones or Crossfire compatible ones. You know, I've got one for my D16 Tyrannus sticking out the back. You can get a whole bunch, no longer you need to worry about the little inbuilt ones that could be a bit iffy. This bad boy just comes with a proper receiver, so you can go as long as you want. But let's do it now. Have a look at the components. That's the overview. A little screamer you take out under 100 grams is beautiful to fly. Some of the components, well, you can see we've got a pretty solid base plate here. I think it's 2.5 millimeters, solid carbon, and it's also got these little protective spurs on the outside, so you shouldn't be dinging up any motors or anything like that. Because it's so light, I don't think you are ever going to break this one, especially with these big struts you get in between all the arms. Flipping it over, you can see we've got some of the stars of the show, these Happy Model motors. They're 1103s, 7,000 kVs. They scream, especially when you combine them. Emax Scimitar props on the top. But what I do like is, and I don't know if they actually are official Scimitars or something, but you do get a spare set of these props. What I do like, unlike the Red Devil or the Sailfly or some of the other toothpicks out there, this one, you screw your props down. So no longer are they going to fly off the top. I really think that's a fantastic solution, because sometimes when I've been flying around, you really give a quad, a toothpick, some gusto. That little prop is not going to be secured enough. It's going to fly off the top. There's no chance of that happening when it comes to this one. Now moving towards the middle, we've got one of the other stars of the show. And that's the Crazy Bee F4 Pro version of the flight controller, so they've upgraded it. It's working really, really well, and it's also got a 10 amp built-in ES or 4-in-1 ESC in there. OSD, all that sort of jazz. Then we've got our separate own little VTX, which I do like, that has some built-in DVR. So you simply put your little SD card in the side. Right here, I wonder if this is going to be in shot. If not, I'll put a picture on the screen. You put a little SD card in there, and that means you can record your footage when you're flying around without all the static that's coming in sometimes when you get, when you're recording DVR on your goggles. So that's, and then probably something, and that's hooked up just a little dipole antenna out the top. And then something that I probably wasn't expecting, especially for the price range with a receiver and all that sort of stuff. You get a little RunCam camera in the front, which looks gorgeous. So you also have an amazing FPV experience when you're flying around. Now, I should say, keep it only on 25 milliwatts. Don't try to change it or anything like that in the smart audio, because when I did do that, it would seem to reboot when it was on the 500 milliwatt setting and all that sort of stuff. So I really like mine keeping it on 25 milliwatts. That would be my recommendation as well. Even though it looks like sometimes it gives you the option to change it in there, don't do that. Just leave it on the 25 milliwatts. And then, of course, like I mentioned, you've got these receivers, you get a battery, and this little Velcro. I'm not really a big fan of the Velcro strap underneath. I probably would change that. I don't really like these parts. You've got all this extra bit hanging off here. It doesn't make it, I don't know why. Happy Model, just give us some proper Velcro straps that work for these little batteries, please. Don't give us this big, that's just, I don't know, you've got an amazing craft, just put that little 1 or 2 cent extra different Velcro strap in, and it is almost like perfection. Now let's move on, talk about the designer thing. I love how we've got onboard DVR, I love how it's super light, everything else in here. The pod, I thought it would be a little bit more susceptible to breakage or anything like that, but after screaming this thing around, putting so many packs through it, a lot of tumbles, it's held up perfectly, no issues whatsoever. And I really think by having these little motor spurs, you are never going to break this frame. It seems awfully robust, especially considering the weight for under 100 grams. The build quality, well, I guess it is a cheap Chinese buy and fly, and I'm going to say probably 7 out of 10. I haven't had any issues whatsoever. It's probably not as nice as if you did one yourself and direct solder the motors rather than use plugs and all that sort of stuff. And I do wish that we had, instead of a little dipole, maybe like a little tiny circular polarized antenna or something. You can't really complain, and then that's bringing it on to the pros and the cons. And let's get the cons out of the way first. Things I don't like. Well, I would like the VTX to be able to boost up a little bit more, because then I would just fly this thing everywhere, especially because you've got the range of a full-size receiver. I don't like the Velcro strap, and and maybe a little circular polarized antenna. That's it, because then let's talk about the things I love. Number one, it is super lightweight. So if you're worried about weight limits or laws or regulations, this thing is amazing. It is so beautiful to fly, and you're going to say, I know I keep saying it, but when you see the footage, it is so smooth. It really feels better than some of my 5 inches. The way it just hooks around, it just grabs the air. There is no oscillations, no vibrations. It's just a beautiful feeling craft to fly on the sticks. It makes you feel so confident, like you can do anything with it. So the tune is absolutely incredible. The price is ridiculous at around the $100 mark. I can't believe what you can actually get for this. And overall, it just works. Like, it's awesome, and it's also not noisy. So if you want to fly this thing outdoors and you live in a place where a lot of people are, no one is going to give 2 hoots if you're flying this thing around, because it's probably as quiet as like the little Tiny Hawk, when that thing is flying around. It's just super, super low noise when this thing's screaming. So that's it on the bench. You can tell I'm excited, but what I want to do now, and let's do a little poll. I want you to think about what you think about toothpicks and vibrations and all that sort of stuff. Let's just roll some DVR. We'll be out in the field, and you tell me what you think about this thing, especially for the price. I guarantee you're going to be impressed. So let's do it. Go have some fun in the field in 3, 2, 1. Right here, out here in the field. Gonna have some fun. The Grumpy Man's here. Beautiful day. We've got the Lava X, and we'll just find out from Happy Model how this thing goes. Show you some DVR or whatever it's recording on here. Have some fun and rip it around. All right, let's do it. Okie dokie, here we go. And Stuart, why are you showing the recorded DVR instead of the onboard? Don't worry, I'll show you that stuff as well. But the reason I've decided to show you this footage, even with all the static and stuff like that, instead of the onboard DVR recording for most of this flight, is because I need that timer on there. Because I was worried, people like, Stuart, no, you're speeding this thing up. There's no way this little thing could fly that fast, because this thing has power to boot. I mean, look at this thing screaming around. You got to remember, this thing is absolutely tiny. It's under 100 grams, and it is doing some full-on hardcore freestyle that is absolutely just mind-blowingly crazy fast, and it is so smooth. So look at the oscillations. Where are they? They're not here. So I'm so grateful that this thing actually had a timer on here, because I was screaming it around, but I want people to know, look, it's not sped up or anything like that. This is a tiny little craft that's under 100 grams, just performing beautifully, kind of like the Dream Toothpick quad. If you want something you can take out of the field, out to the field, fly it around, it's going to be ultra low noise. You can practice all your tricks. You can have a blast. People aren't going to get upset. It's $100. I don't understand when we get products like this. It makes me feel like, what has the rest of the competition been doing? If this is the crafts we can fly, I'm just kind of blown away. They said, Stuart, this is all you get. This is all you can ever fly. You know what? Just give me another 100 batteries, and I am a very, very happy man. But what we're going to do in a minute, we're going to hand over to Grumpy Trev as well. You can see it's a really, really nice, colourful camera as well. Flying this thing around, it looks great in the goggles, especially if you've got some of those new Sky Zones to pair it up with. It looks beautiful. We'll see what Grumpy Trev thinks. It does suck down the battery a little bit, and I would say, actually, I've got the OSD set up exactly how it comes from the factory. I would like to change that little crosshair in the middle. That kind of is a little bit distracting for me, but luckily that's easy to turn off. But what we will do, we're going to over to Grumpy Trev and see what he thinks. Check out the onboard DVR, but I'd like to know, what do you guys think? You know, the flight time's a little bit short, I should say as well. It does suck down the juice. But what do you guys think when it's screaming around? Do you think it looks better than your toothpick that's out there and some of the other toothpicks you've seen? What do you think for the price? As far as I'm concerned, it is hands down one of the best quads we have ever flown, and especially at this size. You can just tell them so. I mean, look at it. It's bloody beautiful, if I don't say so myself. But let's do it. Hand it over to Grumpy Man, see what he thinks, and have some more fun with the Lava X. Okie dokie, Trev. This is the Happy Model Lava X. Same guys who made the Mobula 7 about a year ago. And what was this like in the air? On your first impressions as well?
Yeah, well, I was pretty impressed. It looked good, but not surprised because Happy Model, I haven't seen a really bad quad come out of those guys. They do their homework. Usually the tunes come pretty well. So I'm a bit like you. I can't wait to fly this because it looked really good. And I love Happy Model stuff.
It sounded quiet too, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And how quiet it was didn't reflect how fast it was going, because it was going like a bullet, I can tell you now. So that was surprising.
Alright, should we put it through spaces?
Yeah, hurry up. Yes, it's got some go.
Sounds so smooth.
You know, it doesn't sound fast, but it's so quiet. But the tune is just...
Is it fast?
It's friggin' quick.
I'd say that means there's a lot less, it's just probably efficient. It's not making noise, it's making power.
No, that's right. It's just nice to fly. I can't believe the price of this thing. It's $98 US, so if you don't buy one of these guys, you're friggin' nuts. Look, I've flown quite a few toothpicks now. This is as good as the best of them.
Okay, is this the best little micro, ultra, whatever it is, quad under 100 grams you've ever flown?
For the money, yes.
Okay, what's better than this?
The Beta FPV.
Okay.
But it's a lot more expensive too. But this is friggin' great. There's not a big difference either, by the way. You just asked me which one was the best. I think that one is the best, but for the money, this one is... Gee whiz. This is... I can't believe how cheap it is. Look, it's so much fun. Look at this. Bloody hell. I just don't... Oh. It's so much fun to fly. I know this is probably a bit like recruiting yourself, but if they told me I couldn't fly a 5-inch or anything bigger tomorrow and I can only fly one of these, I wouldn't give two. This is so much fun to fly. Just as much fun.
Who do you think it's made for?
Anybody. Oh, look, you're crazy if you don't buy one of these. Like, you can fly these. These aren't intimidating too, so, you know, if you're around a few people, they're not going to go crooked because you can hardly hear it. I can't believe how I'm flying this. I've been flying this hard. It's 2.5 minutes. But it's starting to flash up the battery now, but Jesus, so much fun. Alright, I didn't push that battery, it's gonna fall out of the sky, so I'll bring it in.
Alrighty, Trev. Final thoughts on the Lava X out of 10 in terms of performance.
Look, performance out of 10, it's got to be a 10.
Okay, and for $100?
For $100, it's got to be a 10. I don't give 10 and 10s out easy, but this thing here, look, you can wear it as a ring as well if you want, you know, you get that way in fashion, but the value is there, guys. It really is. That was just so much fun, and look, I think the durability is there. The frame looks really, really good. Yeah, you're probably going to crash this a bit too because they go fast and they're fun. Look, you're worried about weight. These things under 100 grams with a battery, so fly them anywhere, guys. A lot of fun.
Nice. Thanks, Brett. Rightio, so there it is. There's my review of the little toothpick killer, I guess you could say, or the only toothpick you guys are ever going to need. What we've got, the Lava X from Happy Model. Hats off to them. And I'm going to say it's just 10 out of 10 in my book. It is very rare that I get so excited about a little craft where something comes along. I was kind of getting a bit over these, to be honest. We've seen so many little brushless Whoop evolutions to whatever these ultra lights, super lights have become. This one, it's the king of them all, and it puts the others to shame after flying Sailflies, Red Devils, Toothpicks, diatone ones, whatever there is. This bad boy absolutely screams, and I can't believe the price. And with full-size receivers, you're going to have an awesome time. So anyway, look, I'm going to put the link down below. Remember, leave a comment because I got one of these to give away to you guys out there as well. So check the official rules and all that sort of stuff. But essentially, I want to know what you think about it. On that, subscribe for more FPV-related content. I'm sorry if you're getting a bit triggered or, you know, it's making you be a bit unhappy with your older toothpick or something like that, but as far as I'm concerned, for the price, everything this does, the onboard DVR is just a bit of a bonus. It's just an absolute screamer that is going to let so many people have an awesome time in this hobby. I do just wish they'd give us, I'm going to go buy some batteries right after filming this. I need to buy more little batteries. I'll put a link down below, yeah, to get some extra batteries. And but I'm going to be a bit sneaky because I'm going to make sure I buy some first before I put this video out because I want more. I want to fly this thing. That's how much I love it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. Subscribe for more FPV related content. Sorry I was so excited. I'm sure it's not every day we get a product like this. I'm sure you can understand. And as always, happy model flying, happy flying. I don't know. Anyway, happy flying. It's amazing. Like it's probably the best toothpick one I've ever flown. Like this small size class puts everything else to shame. I just can't believe how smooth it is. It's like the tune is one of the best tunes of any quad I have ever flown. You know, normally you get a little bit of bobble or something with a small little one. Well, and I think the voltage, I'm like, oh, it's going to be gone soon, but it just still keeps on going. I'm not going to say anymore, I'm going to do this right.
We see the Lava X by Happy. So a pure cell, free cell, micro FPV launcher drones, and this is kind of like a toothpick gun. You know, we've seen the toothpicks have been getting popular recently. So small, this is on 50 grams without the battery. With the battery, I think it's a really nice to see. 77 grams. He's fast and he's small. Fly responsibly. Now this is the FreeSky version. This is the Crazy Bee F4 Pro version 3 flight controller down there. 1103 7,000 kV motors. Replacing them is going to be around $9 each, and I'll tell you more about why I know that. The frame is 100 millimeters, and it's about $97.90 right now on Banggood.com. Banggood.com supplies for this review, so thank you very much. And it's got a Runcam Nano 2 camera right there. It can also do up to 200 milliwatts VTX transmission, plus it has onboard DVR recording. Yes, that is a micro SD card slot. Now right now I'm using a micro SD card, a SanDisk Extreme 32 gigabyte. Make sure you're using 32 or under. The 64 gigabyte may not work. Also, make sure this is formatted before you plop it in there. The Happy Model website has firmware downloads for this. You can load it onto that SD card and then plop it in, and it will update your firmware for your VTX and your recording software. So the Runcam Nano 2, whatever quality you can squeeze out from that is what you're seeing on your SD card. So basically, it's like your FPV feed, maybe a little bit clearer, minus any analog interference or snow or anything like that. So it's just a crystal clear feed, but it's still kind of standard definition video. And even though it's 16 by 9 when you get it on your computer, it's really stretched 4 by 3 because that's a 4 by 3 camera. So if you want it to look normal with normal proportions, you would kind of squeeze that 16 by 9 down to a 4 by 3 aspect ratio on Premiere or your video editing software, and then the video would look normal. Everything is compact. I like the XT30, so you can plug in your 3-cell battery. Does not come with a battery, but I'm using a 350 milliamp hour battery here, high volt, and we just slip it right, I guess this way, and strap it down, and then plug her in, and then get your balance sleeve and snug it up underneath somewhere. I like it for the most part. I like the idea. I like what it does. I like what it's designed to do. Fly a capable, fast, maneuverable micro quad in areas where you've got to be on the DL, or maybe you're just not trying to be obnoxious to people, or you just prefer a small quad like this. The downsides are there are some things that don't work so great about it. Now, the F4 Pro version 3 flight controller is great so far. It hasn't burnt out like the other versions have with the 5-volt regulator like we had problems with on the trash can. However, the FrSky receiver that it comes with is just not it's not good. It just isn't. Now, I wonder if it's because of the carbon fiber. I have a video coming out about the Cinecan, which has no carbon fiber to speak of. Same flight controller, same receiver, much better FrSky transmission. However, with this one, maybe it is the carbon fiber that's kind of surrounding part of the antenna here, and the battery that kind of snuggles up right against it, means that you're going to have fail-safes really close. And I was having them. I had 2 fail-safes the other day when I shouldn't have had any. One when I was flying around me, behind me, not that far away. Woo! Oh look, I just had a fail-safe right there, wherever it was, right behind me. My gosh! And another when I was flying in front of me, not even probably more than 200 feet away. I go barely on the other side, like next to the trees, and I'm like a 38, 37 RSSI. That's not great. I'm gonna put Crossfire in this thing. Oh, yeah. Getting our Mortal T on here. Oh, there it is. Damn! Lost signal. I'm right on the other side of these trees. And that caused me to severely bend 2 of these motors. They still fly, but if you see any jello in the image, that might be from these. So that's disappointing. I do have some more motors on order, and that's why I know they're like $9 or $10. Now right here, it comes with a little sticky tape on this little foam. I have not taken the tape off. I didn't even really need to. So far I've crashed and the battery has not shifted. But if you find your battery is shifting, because shift happens, then you can always take off this red tape and just snug it in and stick it in a little bit tighter. I like the video and I love the maneuverability. I felt like the only thing that was limiting me at that point was my reflexes, because anything I told the quad to do, except for the few times it fail-safed, it was doing. It would turn on a dime. It would accelerate so fast. It's a pleasure to fly when it's working. Now, what I want to do, and I want to get this video out first with the FrSky version, because this is the version they gave me. This is probably the most popular version, considering FrSky is more popular than Crossfire. I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to sacrifice a few grams to do it. I'm going to put this Crossfire Nano receiver along with an Immortal T, or maybe something similar, and get Crossfire on this thing, because that's the only limiting factor. Even if the Cinecan had the same range, this guy is twice as fast, 3 times as maneuverable, and just so freaking fun that you want to go far. You're supposed to go far, it feels like. This guy's got the ducks, like he's got covered props, so you're not going to be hitting things. This is like for inside, flying around people. This guy is if you really want to go balls to the wall with a micro quad. And so to have a receiver that can't match that experience and is really the only thing hindering this from being a good quad as is, means that, yeah, forget FrSky, Crossfire all the way.
Now, if you're not set up for Crossfire on your radio, you could go the XM Plus route. This is a FrSky XM Plus on a ViFly X150 here, and it's a prime example of something you could do and still get better reception than the little F4 version 3 Crazy Bee built-in receiver.
Now, even though it doesn't come with a battery, it does come with a few extras, like an extra canopy. And this one is kind of see-through. It's not quite as opaque as that one. And then also, obviously, some extra props and some tools. But otherwise, pretty simple. You basically just get the drone. Like I said, just get some batteries, some 3-cell. You have the most fun with 3-cell. I've also flown some 2-cell. I'll show you. The other day, I put in some packs using these Raceday Quad 300 mAh 2-cell batteries. And it was actually pretty fun. I had a good time. The only thing is, your throttle value is going to be way higher because 3-cell obviously has more power. So if you want to get the best experience out of this Larva X, get yourself a 3-cell, maybe 300 or 350, maybe even 400 mAh could fit. And yeah, keep this under 100 grams and you can have a great time without bothering people or freaking people out. Now, the bind button under here is a little bit of a pain to get to. You've got to take off the VTX and the camera and all that stuff, the housing. Bypass all that. The instructions will give you some information on how to enter the binding mode through CLI, through your USB connection, right, where's the, oh, underneath here. Yeah, that's right. I currently fly the Larva X with the Taranis X90 Plus and the Fat Shark HD3 goggles. Check the links in the description below to the goggles and the radios that I use to fly these. So I'm looking forward to putting this through more of its paces after I wire Crossfire into this. Totally doing that first. Then it's off to the races and we'll just see where all I can fly this bad boy. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Check the Banggood.com link to the Larva X. They've been really good to me about supplying things to review. And I hope to review some more things in the future, including this guy, the Cinecan. He's up next. Stay tuned.
Alright, so in this video we're checking out the Twig XL from Beta FPV. So this is the 2021 version. The 2020 version, which was the 3-inch prop-based version, is no longer in production. As far as I know, it's been discontinued. So this is the new model for 2021. I think it's been out for a little while. I don't know how long it's been out. They just sent this to me recently, so I just wanted to go over some of the differences. I don't think I reviewed the 3-inch version. I reviewed the 4-inch version of this, so these are all based on the same Twig frame here. It's basically like a stretch deck frame with these iconic braces in the front and the back. Usually there's a curved one in the front and a straight one in the back. And this is obviously for 3.5-inch props, so they give you the 3.5-inch gym fans and also the HQs. I elected to go with the gym fans on this particular setup. Upgraded motors, upgraded camera, Ratel 2, upgraded video transmitter. Now it goes up to 350 milliwatts. I'll just put a little table up here of all the differences between the two versions, the 2020 and the 2021. Obviously, now that we're at 3.5 inches, we're going to get more power. But this is a much lighter setup than the 4-inch version that I reviewed last year. So this will definitely get you under the 250 gram mark if you go with the recommended 4S 450 LiPo, which is what I flew with. And I think these are, let's see, 1404s, they're 3800 kV, so typical of this class for 4S 3.5 inches. A ton of these now. I know you guys are looking for around the video that I still have to go through a couple more vendors, so hang on. There's a few more of these coming out. They're all coming out in bunches now, and after I get through all of those reviews, I will do a roundup on all the 3.5-inch models because there's a lot of them now, and you're probably wondering what all the differences are. So I'll go over that in that video coming up. But this is, obviously bottom-mounted battery. They have a sticky pad now on this version that will really hold that battery in. So if you crash a lot, it's gonna, hold that battery in no problem. This is the Crossfire receiver version. It's got the standard Crossfire antenna here in the back. I think it comes in other receiver versions as well. They have also updated the canopy here. This is the X-Night canopy. They were using the older canopy model before. Now this is the newer version. This one's a fair bit tougher. And I believe the all-in-one ESC is also upgraded. I think this one is 20 amps now instead of 12 previously. So yeah, let's just go right to how much this thing weighs. All right, so it's 103.6 grams, and then with the battery, this is the all-up flying weight, 150.2. So well under the 250 gram limit, and I believe this is, in this setup here, the lightest with the recommended battery of any of the 3.5-inch ones out there. So you're going to get the most performance weight for this particular model of the 3.5-inch ones, because it does the bottom-on battery and just basically a minimalistic canopy in the center. And yeah, this is mainly for racing. So if you're looking for racing 3.5-inch stuff, this is kind of what it's for. And the frame is very durable, although it is again a unibody. It's not a removable arm. So the bottom plate, if you crack it anywhere, which is going to be pretty tough to do at this weight.
Hello everyone, FPV Emperor here. I have come with an update on how this analog 2-inch wingsuit 2.0 frame performed. I tested it on 300 mAh batteries 1S and 500 mAh batteries 1S. With 300 mAh batteries, I consistently got 3 minutes, and it's only one battery that I got about 4 minutes. With the 550s, I consistently got 7 minutes and 45 seconds with all the batteries I tried. So these are all the batteries I have. I have about 4 550s and 6 300 mAh batteries, and I can say that the results were consistent all through. This build consists of the wingsuit frame. This frame, this is only painted black satin. Feels really good with a satin feel. So this frame can both do analog and digital frames. Digital builds. And for the digital build, which is this one, I used the Runcam CO4 camera, 1103 motors from Ycedo, which are the same as the 1103s from Beta FPV, these ones.
so we're checking out the Happy Model baseline in this video. This is a 2-inch 2S micro. I think in my previous video on the NanoFly 20, I think I mentioned this as a 2S or a 2-inch 1S micro, but it's actually a 2S micro. So
It's huge.
much a bigger setup here, bigger motors, obviously 2S battery, so the performance is going to be quite a bit different from the NanoFly. But if you're looking for something a little bit more beefy, with of course weight penalty, it gets obviously going to be heavier. Anyway, so let's take a look at what comes in the box. It comes in this little plastic carrying case. Doesn't come with any batteries. I'll talk about the battery situation here in a second. So you get 2 of these battery trays that goes on the bottom. You have to install these yourself, but they don't come installed. I'll show you that here in a second. It's not a big deal. You got a spare one here. It's just 3D printed CPU, spare canopy, and I believe this is for like a RunCam split. So if you happen to have like one of those boards from the Mobula 7 HD, Mobula 6 HD, I think this is the same canopy, and you can transfer that camera over to this one to make it an HD setup if you want. Get some stickers, of course, at the bottom there. Get a bag with some spare props, prop removal tool, some spare nuts and screws, screwdriver, Allen wrench, and extra battery pads. So this little battery tray here on the bottom, you have to take off these nuts that are on the screw, and then just slide on the battery tray on here. It's a 3D printed parts, and then put the nuts back on. It takes like 5 minutes. The recommended battery is this 2S 450 GMB high volt, and it does fit in here, although it's a very, very tight fit. There are other batteries that they said that could be used, a 350, 450, 550, 650. Of course, those probably won't fit this tray exactly like this one does. It's a very tight fit, even with the 450. I didn't have a 350, so I did try a 300 2S. This one also fits in here, no problem. It's a bit looser, but it's not. It doesn't slide out. It's a little bit looser fit. Flight times are going to be quite a bit different. 4 minutes to 4.5 minutes if you're flying kind of slower. Maybe even 5 minutes if you're really just cruising around on the 450. The 300 is not going to give you that much if you're pretty aggressive, which I think you're going to want to be because it's going to have a better power to weight ratio with this lighter setup here. Looking at a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes of flight time on the 300, depending on how aggressively you're flying. And so we have a 2-inch micro. We have 1103 motors in this one here. These EX 1103, 11,000 kV motors. Got the Gem Fan tri-bladed 2-inch props. The board on here is their X12 board, and this one is the Express LRS version. You can see the little ceramic antenna on board there. 12 amp ESCs, has a built-in Express LRS receiver. It's got the Betaflight 4.3 something firmware with the version 2 Express LRS on here. So if you want the version 3, you have to go to the website and get the updated Betaflight firmware to get this to Express LRS version 3. But that's a DIY project. You have to do that on your own. And it does come with an onboard Open VTX 400 milliwatt video transmitter. Of course, this is analog. So you got a single board for all that. For your camera, you get your Caddx Ant analog camera and this canopy, and then your VTX antenna comes out the top here. The bottom plate frame that holds everything is about 2 millimeters thick, and then of course the motors that are being held on with 3 screws here, although there is also a 4-screw mount if you have a different motor, if you want to try a different motor out. And of course you have the plugs for the motors, pretty typical half mile, along with a micro USB port here pointing out the bottom. Alright, so this is how much the drone weighs. It's a little over 40 grams, 40.6 grams on my scale, and then with the recommended battery, the 2S450, the total weight's at 68.4. If you go with a lighter 300, the weight comes in at 60.1. So if I didn't mention it before, this is called the baseline, and this is actually a design inspired by Nathan Loops. I think he's one of the Happy Model team pilots, and I guess this is one of his favorite models that he's been flying around for some time, so they decided to make a bind and fly model out of it. thing, they did go with a bigger motor setup, obviously for heavier setup, 1103 motors. And if you kind of compare this to like the Flywoo Baby Nano 20, which is very similar to this one, that one comes with 1002 motor, so it's a much smaller motor on a bi-blade 2-inch prop. So it doesn't have as much acro performance as this one, but that one weighs a little bit less. So if you're looking for more acro performance in a 2-inch setup here, this is probably the best one with the biggest motor, obviously. You know, if you're looking for power and accurate performance, you obviously the bigger motor, the bigger battery, the better. So, you know, the question is, how does this 2-inch 2S toothpick compare to your normal, like, traditional toothpick, the 3-inch 3S toothpick? So that usually is like a 1303, 1303.5 motor on 5000 kV on a 3S battery. And of course, the 3-inch is going to beat this 2-inch pretty much every day, twice on Sunday. So, you know, I'm not going to get that question, how does the 2-inch compare to 3-inch? 3-inch it's just going to be better. It's got bigger prop, more power, 3S battery. It's just going to be better than a 2-inch and 2S setup. And conversely, the 2-inch 2S setup is going to still beat out a 2-inch 1S setup or a 2-inch 2S setup with a smaller motor. So, you know, if you're comparing this one to the Flywoo, this one's better than the Flywoo, and then the Flywoo is better than the one from Sub 250, the one I just reviewed recently, the NanoFly 20. You know, of course, at the same time, we each sort of, you know, downgrade. You know, smaller motor, smaller battery, less battery. The overall weight is going to be less. The noise is going to be less, of course. So it kind of really depends on what you're looking for and what your priorities are. So if you're looking for, you know, ultimate power and performance, obviously you want to go as big as possible and just get a 5-inch. You know, 5-inch on 6S. That's going to give you the best performance out of anything you want to be flying FPV. But of course, in a micro, this is a pretty good package. You know, if you want to go take the next step up, you can move it to a 2.5-inch toothpick or a 3-inch toothpick. You know, those have already come out. You know, I have plenty of videos of those on my channel already. But yeah, this kind of fills in a little bit of a gap there, and that sort of between the 3-inch toothpick and like the 2-inch, you know, toothpicks are like not as much power. This one kind of fills in that little gap where you're kind of looking for a little bit more performance. This one fills that gap in pretty nicely. Now this version is Express LRS. It does come in a SPI FreeSky version and a FlySky version on the flight controller. Of course, it's a built-in receiver. Only comes in analog right now. Probably would be too hard to convert this to Walksnail or HD0. You just have to add the video transmitter board, and you know, it just will mount here. You'll probably need a longer screw to mount the extra board, and then you need a spacer, you know, the rubber grommets to mount those, but it probably isn't going to be too hard. You just have to find the screws, the longer screws to do that. So of course it comes with a pretty decent pit tune out of the box. I think Happy Mile has kind of gone the other direction where they're really pushing sort of the limits of their pit tune. So I think on mine, the flight controller is kind of screwed down a little bit too tight, so I get there's a fair amount of prop wash oscillation, especially on hard turns on my particular setup. I think it's just because the flight controller might be screwed down a little bit tighter than probably the one that they actually tune. So they put, you know, they obviously build one, they tune it, and then probably that one had their flight controller a little bit less screwed down, and so mine being a little bit more screwed down probably has a little bit more vibrations because of that. It's not terrible. It's just something I noticed. You know, obviously I could probably tinker with the tune or tinker with the, you know, the tightness of the screws on the flight controller. Those are things that I could probably play with, but of course I never do that because I just bind it up and fly it like I always do on all my reviews. I did notice that when you go to a smaller, lighter battery, the vibrations do get a little bit worse, especially in when you're doing the hard maneuvers. And I think it's because the tune is for the slightly heavier battery, and you know, obviously at this weight level here, you know, 5-10 grams of weight difference is going to make a difference in the pit tune. So just something to be aware of. If you are going to be using different batteries, or you know, maybe even a bigger, heavier battery, the way it's going to perform is going to feel different and look different compared to what you're going to see with the 2S 450. I didn't fly too much on the 2S 300 because it didn't really fly that great, and this is not one of the recommended batteries, but I don't have a 350. It's just that I did notice that the performance is a lot better because it's lighter on the smaller battery, but at the expense of flight time. You just don't get the flight time because the battery is a lot smaller. Anyway, last thing to note here is on the motor protection, pretty good. A lot of carbon there to protect that motor. So if you're going to be doing a lot of acro tricks, which I think you will want to do with this one, and you crash, this one will probably be okay, I think, for the most part. Yeah, other than that, not much more to say with this one. I like the performance of this one, you know, for this size. I am curious to see if they would make a digital version, like a walk snail version down the road. Obviously, it's going to add 10 more grams, probably. And how does this fly with an extra?
Have a look. This is a 2S 2-inch build, and it weighs right around 40 grams. Apparently, this was inspired by Nathan Loops all the way back in 2019, which I didn't know. But apparently, this has been an idea that's been brewing for a while, and now we finally have it in a Biden fly. Mine came with the X12 that was running ELRS 2.0, as well as OpenVTX that was power switchable up to 400 milliwatts. It's using the EX1103 11,000 kV Happy Model motors. We have a Cadex camera, and when I ran it on these 2S 450 China Hobbyline batteries, I got about 3.5 to 4 minutes. Now, I should mention, when I was going to try this out the first time, I tried using the stock battery holder, and they do list that it will only hold up to a certain size battery. These 450s, however, by China Hobbyline are a bit thick, so I did have to hop in Tinkercad and just make a little bit larger version of what they had. I'll include a link down below to this on Thingiverse. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and skip all the pleasantries and just go check out some first flights on our baseline.
Lost. Telemetry recovered.
I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. This is the Happy Model Larva X. What do they think a larva is over there? Because larvas aren't very appealing. Anyway, never mind. If you just bought this quad and you need help setting it up, this is the video for you. I'm going to walk you through every step of the setup, from just taking it out of the box, which I just did, to creating a model on your transmitter, binding it. Even if we need to go in beta flight, we'll do that too. And then we're going to go out and we're going to fly it for the very first time. So come along. The very first thing we need to do in order to get this quad flying is bind the receiver to our transmitter. So this is the transmitter, and it takes your stick inputs and it transmits them to the quad. The quad has on it a thing called a receiver, and it receives the stick inputs and communicates them to the flight controller, which then makes the quadcopter fly. And binding is the process of telling this receiver that it should be listening to this transmitter. When you're out at the field and you've got a bunch of friends flying, they're all transmitting at the same time. How do you make sure that you're not controlling your friend's quad? Binding is the process of how you do that. The transmitter that we're going to be using in this example is the FrSky X9 Lite. And we're using that because I actually think it's a pretty good beginner transmitter. But if you just bought your FrSky X9 Lite, you actually can't bind it to the Happy Model Larva X. The FrSky X9 Lite comes from the factory programmed to support something called the Access Protocol. This guy doesn't use the Access Protocol. It uses a different protocol called D16. Now, I've actually done a firmware update on my X9 Lite that lets it support D16 protocol. And if you have an X9 Lite, you will need to do that in order to bind this guy to your X9 Lite. I have a video about how to do that. It's linked down in the video description. And if you're using this exact gear, then you're going to need to go through that step. However, if you're using any other FrSky radio like the QX7, the X9D, any of those radios that support the D16 protocol out of the box, then you don't need to do anything special. You'll just be ready to go. If you are using one of those other radios, don't freak out. The screens that you'll see are going to look an awful lot like the screens that are on this radio. A few of the screens might be a little different, but you can probably get through it. So let's power this radio on.
Welcome to OpenTX. Throttle warning.
Lovely. What I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to create a brand new model in the X9 Lite transmitter. Now, what's a model? If you have a bunch of different quadcopters, airplanes, cars, boats, a bunch of different radio-controlled craft, you might have a different model in your transmitter for each of them, because on some of them the switches may do one thing, on some of them the switches may do something else, and the model is the collection of settings that is appropriate for each vehicle that you're flying. Now, in reality, I use the same model for all of my quadcopters because all of my quadcopters are set up exactly the same. A lot of people in the beginning feel more comfortable creating a new model for every vehicle that they fly, every aircraft, etc. You can decide how you want to do that. In this case, I'm going to take you through the process of setting up a new model because, well, you may not have set one up before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the menu key, and I'm going to scroll down to slot number 2, and I'm going to long press and create model. This will create a brand new blank model. I'm then going to be asked to select the model type, and I'm just going to hit exit and back out of that. We'll set this up manually. Now that this model is loaded, I'm going to press the page key one time, and there's a bunch of options here. I'm not going to worry about most of them, but I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of the screen where I see the option internal RF mode. And I'm going to click one time, and I'm going to change that mode from access to ACCST D16. That is the mode that this radio needs to be in order to be able to bind to the receiver on the Happy Model Larva X. Then I'm going to scroll down to where it says bind, and I'm going to click one time, and I'm going to choose channel 1 through 8 telemetry on. Don't worry about that option's not too important, just select that option. And then the radio will begin beeping like you hear now. That indicates to us that it is in binding mode. Here on the computer, I'm going to start up Betaflight Configurator, and if this is really your first time, you may never have downloaded Betaflight Configurator. I've got a separate video that walks you through the process of downloading Betaflight Configurator, installing it, and installing the STM32 USB virtual COM port drivers. These are some things you got to go through the very first time you set up a quadcopter. If you've never done that before, link in the video description to my Betaflight setup video. We're going to assume that you've done that or that you've gone and watched that video and come back, and now you have the configurator ready to go. I'm going to plug this quadcopter in to the USB port on my computer. And when I do that, you should see that COM3 or some other COM port number appears right here, and that will indicate that it's plugged in and ready to go. If I unplug USB, you see it disappears and becomes COM1, or maybe it says manual selection. That indicates to you that your drivers are working, your USB port is working, etc. I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. I'm going to go take that out of bind mode so that it's not beeping at me the whole time. Be right back. The next thing I did is I went to the configuration screen here, and I want to check the type of receiver protocol that the Larva X is sent with, and I can see that it is set to FreeSky_D, and that is unfortunate because the FreeSky_D protocol is actually not supported by my radio. I'm going to change that from FreeSky_D to FreeSky_X. If you're using most modern FreeSky radios, you probably want to be using FreeSky_X, not FreeSky_D. I know the reason why they ship it with FreeSky_D, but we're going to change that, and we're going to hit save and reboot. If you have a transmitter that supports D8 mode binding, then you don't have to make that change that I just showed you. But my transmitter doesn't support D8, and yours may not either. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the CLI tab, the command line tab, and I want you to see on the quadcopter that there is a blinking red light at the front of the quadcopter. I'm going to type the command bind_RX_SPI. And when I do that and hit enter, you'll see that light go solid red, and that will indicate that the quadcopter is in binding mode. Now I'll go ahead and reactivate binding here on the transmitter. And you see that the light begins blinking again on the quadcopter. That indicates that binding has happened. There's one more thing that I need to do here in the binding screen, and that is where it says failsafe, I need to change that from not set to no pulses. The reason that's important is that the failsafe setting controls what happens if your quadcopter loses connection with the transmitter for any reason, like if you just pull the battery out, or if you fly too far away and the radio link gets weak. No pulses is what you want the failsafe set to, and that will cause the flight controller to know that that's happened, and the quad will basically shut down and fall out of the sky. Better than it flying into somebody's face. The next thing I need to do is I need to check the channel order of the transmitter to see that it matches the channel order that the quadcopter is expecting. And looking here in the documentation of the device, we can see it says the default channel map for the Larva X is TAER. TAER refers to the throttle, T. Aileron, we don't actually have ailerons, this isn't an airplane, but on an airplane, the ailerons control the roll axis, the elevator controls the pitch axis, and the rudder controls the yaw axis, and it would make a lot more sense if we just said pitch, roll, and yaw, but we don't. We say AER. So TAER is the channel order that we need, and we're going to check that by hitting menu one time, and then page, and we'll keep hitting page until we get to the mixer screen, and we want to see that the channel order is TAER, and sure enough it is, so we don't need to make any changes there. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up an arming switch for the quadcopter. Arming means that you're telling the quadcopter that you are ready to fly it and you want it to begin spinning the motors, and disarming means that you want the quadcopter to be sort of safe and not spin the motors. So it's like the ignition on your car. I think that the best arming switch on most transmitters is the upper left shoulder. Just a big 2-position switch is usually there, and that's what we can use to arm. Some people prefer to use a switch on the front of the radio because they find it a little easier to reach with their fingers. The bottom line is you need to find a switch that you will remember and that you find sort of ergonomically pleasant. You do not want it to be a momentary switch. You see how that switch doesn't hold its position? You don't want it to be a momentary switch. You want it to be a switch that holds its position, and personally, I like a 2-position switch. Arm, disarm, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this switch right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to channel 5, and I'm going to click one time, and that will create a new mix on channel 5. A mix is a way of mapping inputs, like a switch, to outputs to the receiver and to the flight controller. I'm going to go down one line to where the source is for the mix, and I'm going to click one time, and the source will begin blinking. Then I'm going to flip the switch one time that I'm going to use to control this function. And you'll see it fills in the name of the switch there, SD. I'm going to hit exit one time and it'll stop blinking. But that's actually all that we need to do. You can see here that as I flip the switch, we can see this channel position here in the channel monitor moving from low to high and back again. Now the documentation for the Larva X shows that it comes pre-configured with an arming range set up so that the quadcopter will arm, and this yellow segment of the channel is where the quadcopter will arm. So the low position is down here, the high position is up here, and we can see that the quadcopter is set up to arm when the channel is in the high position. You can obviously set this up any way that you prefer, but this is the default way that it comes set up to make your life a little easier. If we go back and look at our switch positions here, we can see that when the switch is pushed away from you, the channel is in the low position, and when the switch is pulled toward you, the channel is in the high position. So what that's going to mean is you push away to arm, disarm, and pull towards to arm. And that's actually, doesn't really matter, but that's actually not how I like it. I think it's easier to disarm by just pulling towards yourself as opposed to arming by pushing away. So here's how we would reverse that if we wanted to. One way we could reverse it is just to go into Betaflight and change the way the arming mode is defined. The other way we can reverse that is to press Page and then Menu to get to the mixer screen. We'll go down to that channel 5 and we will long press and edit. And then we will change the weight from 100 to -100. And what that'll do is that'll just reverse the definition of the channel. It'll reverse the output of the channel. And then it'll basically flip the switch position. And go, weight of -100. And now if I exit out, you can see that when the switch is toward me, the channel is in the low position, and when it's away, it's in the high position. So now we have push away to arm and pull towards to disarm. You can set that up however you like, just remember how it's set up. That is actually pretty much all we need to do. We probably could fly this guy right now, but let's go back to the computer because there's a few more checks that I want to do just to make sure that everything is working the way that it should be working. So let's walk through just a couple more things I think you need to do before you take this guy out and try to fly it. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the receiver tab in Betaflight, and I just want to check that the channels are all the way that they need to be. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the sticks up, down, left, right. And what you want to see is that I'm moving the throttle up and down now, and the throttle channel is moving. The yaw is left and right on the left stick, and the yaw channel is moving. Pitch is up and down on the right stick, and the pitch channel is moving, and roll is left and right on the right stick, and the roll channel is moving. This is a Mode 2 transmitter. That's the way that my channels are mapped. You're probably using a Mode 2 transmitter, but in case you're not, the exact location of your pitch, roll, throttle, and yaw may not be the same, but you're going to want to just check that those are all correct, and the default settings are probably correct for most people. The other thing I want to check is the endpoints of my channels. Now, in this case, you can see that when my throttle is all the way down, my channel is at 988, and when it's all the way up, it's at 2012. Now, you absolutely can fly with it like this, but I'm going to show you a step that you can go through to tweak this just a bit to be absolutely perfect. Depending on the transmitter that you're using, your values may be way different. And if your values are way different, here's how to fix it. What you need to do is take each of the 4 channels and move the sticks left and right, up and down, and make a note of the values you see at the endpoints, at the extreme endpoints for each channel. Now, in my case, all of my channels are 988 and 2012. 988 and 2012. 988, 2012. So, for me, it's going to be simple because the numbers are the same. For you, you may need to make a note of roll, elevator, roll, yaw, and throttle. That's the endpoint values. And what you can do is you can go to the command line and type RX range 0, 988.
我妈有跛小脚啊。
好，来到我们这个环节是家里的荷兰呐。
哎，那
好，这个
环节是个什么样的环节呢？它基本上就是个吹牛游戏。好，大家进场之后，前面一张纸条，上面是没有形容词的人物或者是一个物件。那等一下我们就用这个纸条来进行我们的吹牛游戏。每轮会有一个人不知道纸条内容什么，有2个人是知道的。
对，
这2个人都要负责去形容描述这个东西。然后我们有2分钟，前30秒是不能说谎的，后面1分半是可以说谎的。那这个没有看不到纸条的人呢，他就要负责猜出这东西什么，以及抓到说谎的人是谁。
就是他可以抓是谁说谎，
对，
但是最终目标是要猜出来啦。
没错，
对，所以前面30秒真的非常重要，要不然基本上后面已经没有机会猜到了。然后我觉得，等一下大家，
谢谢。我感觉到惩罚的部分。
这个纸频道好吵哦，
它就是一个字母画面，但这个母画面很大。
没有，就是你
这种手语老师在椭圆形，我也想把它缩到很小很小，那太吵了，
太干扰了。
好了，
好，那猜拳了，最赢的先猜。
最赢的，
对，最赢的哈，来，
有人不理解吗？
我们会剪刀石头布，那剪刀石头布就是剪刀石头，布会输石头这样子。好，这样他们大概知道了，
布会输石头。大家记好哦，等下规则是这样哦。
规则我没有玩过，这个规则我不大确定，是什么样玩法？
就是布会输石头啦，这个布会输给石头，懂吗？等一下要这样玩哦。
这样。
布会输石头哦，
不会输石头。
剪刀会赢布哦。
剪刀会赢，剪刀还会赢，所以不会输了。
出布都会输。
剪刀石头布。你说了。对啊，出布的意思。
哪一种规则？
布会输石头，但是也会输剪刀。我刚才说过，布怎么样都输。
好，不然再给你一次机会，剪刀石头布，剪刀石头布。
没什么话讲吧？没关系啊，
剪刀石头布。
布会输石头，
但是剪刀没有在里面，所以剪刀还是输石头。
漂亮，查理很漂亮哦，很厉害哦，脑袋转很快哦。好，查理第一个，
快剪。
哇，
哈利第一个，我们4人都超烂的，给他啦。哈利第一个，阿达第2个，我第3个。
好，我们来看一下哈利的这个纸条是啥呢？来，哈利，来，哦，好专哦。这东西好专、
完了，我是笨蛋呢。
我知道，好，可以了，可以吗？
我可以啊，你 OK 了啊？来，往前面站一点。
它有点神秘哦。OK， 好，
来，哈利的挑战哦。
好，前30秒不能说 ，Ready start。
我可能外婆用过，
我外婆也用过。
说实在，我妈妈现在也可能还在用，
偶尔可能会用到啦。
对，
可是它现在形态跟以前不太一样了。
你记得的形态是什么呢？什么样子的？
我知道了，
它有点，
我想想，
我外婆也觉得快乐时代
我外婆不是从
清朝啊，我外婆是1900几年的。
你到底觉得我们的外婆年纪有多老？130了吗？现在？
我妈妈也没有在裹小小，我家是守父权社会，
封建时期的。
抱歉，
我们家的状况可能是我爸在裹小小。对啊，
好特别。
理解一下啊，不是哦。然后他常常会放在阳台这种地方吧？有吧。
对，而且不小心你会滑倒。
对，然后有时候他还会有常常配一个东西，就是一个很长的板子。对吧？
当兵的时候，
我抓当兵的时候，
我还没讲啊，我只讲当兵的时候啊。来，你要先猜吗？
本金。
你在说什么？
你可以离开3岁角色吗？
在说什么？
本金。
本金还是什么？
本金。
不是，
其实现在也是有在用啊。
对啊。
要继续吗？要继续吗？好，了解。好，其实它可以变成各种形状。
是的，
它可以。
我抓。
形态可以吧？可以啊。而且有人觉得在当兵的时候那东西有点危险。在当兵的时候，有时候会被他害到。
这个其实很大哦。对。
我知道了。
什么？
洗衣板。有贴近的吗？
为什么当兵的时候会
被洗衣板害到吗？
你们以前是不是当兵都要自己手洗？
对，我洗衣板会被他敲。
全部都敲啊！
那到监狱好不好？不想当兵好不好？
我知道了。水晶肥皂。
我跟你讲，我这边提示他一下了啦。
知道吗？肥皂可以理解，水晶肥皂为什么知道？
因为你要放在阳台上。
我妈有裹小脚啊。
外婆没有，妈妈裹小，哎，
耶！
曹哈利，不要再破坏节目的节奏了，好不好？刚多久？1分19秒。
哦，是哦。
哇塞！
我不是很在意啊。
你好歹撑到1分钟好
好，
吗？
换你们了，加油哦！
厉害了，今天晚上。
曹哈利没有压力了，
水晶都猜得出来，我本来要说它价值1颗
因为你们刚刚一开始说这个很专业，
很专业，
这个很特别。
好了，那个错好不好？我们说，之后我什么提示都不给你，因为我觉得他很棒，这样。我给你这种形容词，我觉得他很 fancy。
OK， 我知道了，是第二个小
准备好了吗？好，第一点哦 ，OK。来
看看啊是什么呢？
没道理啊！为什么我每次的纸条都会有这种反应呢？
来吧，可以了，
难吗？对你们而言？
超级难。你可能我很担心你一秒钟就猜到了，但我尽可能的不会。
OK， 好，
来哦，
前30秒还是不能说谎哦。
好，
来，前30秒不能说谎 ，Ready start。
我差很远。
这是什么在图书馆巧遇了？
快点，他丧失了他的时间。
哺乳类。
好，是人，我知道了。好，然后
母的。
女性，好，我知道了。来，
有毛。
他蛮有名，蛮有名。
哦，真的哦。
对
，OK。
我可以说是他第1名啊。
他第1名。他第1名。
我要第1名。OK。
先停一下，30秒了。你们30秒里面有15秒都在太了吧这一段。女性好。蔡英文。
哎呦，
漂亮。曹哈利，
可以了，先停好不好？不要破坏游戏的节奏好吗？
会了好不好？好，继续，来，
我们真的要小心一点哦。小心一点，来了，好，开始。
喜欢打篮球。
钱维娟。
我跟你讲，他打篮球的时候那个发型厉害，对了，他打篮球很有名的。
他足球。
打篮球。打篮球，他没有打篮球。
打篮球。
曹哈利，没有吧？真假的吧？
我说嘛。
好，来继续。
他溜冰也很厉害。
抓。好，来继续，来。
好，他溜冰真的不厉害，但我必须说，他可能音乐的部分很蛮强的。他音乐的部分蛮强的。
音乐部分蛮强。
对，第1名乐理，对。
然后行销手段也非常棒。
我跟你说，大家都以为他是，但是其实没想到他
屁话一堆。
不要讲
废话，
就没想到他，其实他在演奏音乐的时候，他是绿色的。
我们以为他不是绿色的，因为他是绿色的，我也不知道为什么。
哇，
抓好啊！可恶！
不是绿色的，我在想绿色是谁？
而且你知道吗？他后来才认清，他原本不是。
是绿色的。
然后，
是绿色的母的哺乳类。绿色的母的哺乳类，第1名。会演奏音乐。
很会卖东西。
很会卖东西。
我跟你说，尤其，
你要说谎对不对？来，我先抓，来你说，给个谎给你什么？
我蛮懂。我满脑，我说认真的，先证明一下，我满脑子没有谎言。这是最危险的地方。 它太有名了。
绿色的，
绿色的，
母的，哺乳类，
哺乳类
音乐很强。
我跟你讲，
平时的牛的，
他可以说是我，不能说是全部是他的错，但是他的确剥夺了我1个多月的某一种快乐。他真的剥夺了。
什么？
对我来说，他是我心中的杂耍冠军。
你不要讲你心中了，你那扭曲的心理我不知道。
我跟你说，他一直说他从来没有这样自称自己。他有一个称号啊。
但他后来认清了嘛？
我不知道，他曾经其实讲过。我跟你讲，我刚刚没有告诉你，他剥夺我的快乐是什么，对不对？我告诉你，我超喜欢吃我们家楼下的一间控肉饭。我那间控肉饭超好吃，控肉饭超好吃。
绿色的是控肉饭的母的哺乳类。
我跟你讲，绿色的，我每一天吃一间卤饭，我好喜欢哦。
你们怎么觉得我会猜到？
我告诉你，有
绿色的，
有神秘的力量，对。
有神秘的力量，
有神秘的力量影响你啊！
他也会，然后也有人做成白色版的。
啊，在说好吗？白色版的，
你想想看，
最近很多人 cosplay
我请问一下，演奏音乐的时候会是绿色的人会谁啊？
等一下，演奏音乐会变绿色的人，
浩克也会变绿色嘛？
对，但浩克不会演奏音乐啊，而且他也跟母的女浩克
哎，
女浩克，
漂亮。
什么？
那
3、
浩克的内裤
1、0，没有了，最后一个。
我是笨蛋吗？我是笨蛋吗？
没有，你不是笨蛋，你不是笨蛋。
我们只是很小心翼翼的在经营这一块。
我看这答案我会生气吗？
你不会生气，
你会生气，
你会
恍然大悟，
你会笑出来。
来，我们看一下纸条。
答案是什么呢？
我绿色的，不要了，我以为它是什么颜色，但没想到它演奏音乐的时候绿色的。
我认输。
跟你很难哎。我真的觉得
绿色的 ，OK，
我真的觉得还好，我记得很多，然后我讲出来，他们还有印象。哇！
哦，真的，他们真变绿色，没有错。
好了，可以了。
第一名，
的确剥夺我控肉饭的快乐吧。我整了一个多月，控肉饭好好吃哦，我好饿哦，来吧。
的确哦，跟猪肉有关系啊。好。
我们来看看接下来最后。
下一张纸条怎么可能超越这张啊？
要挑战的是什么呢？
绿色的很屌哎。
诶，什么？
来，好，来，我收起来，来，刚刚回合，30秒不能说 ，Ready start 哦
，30秒，
绿色的。
绿色的好，要多少时间？
也有褐色的。
也有褐色的。
对。
就合适。
对，有时候不一定什么颜色。
真的。
对啊。
然后他其实很喜欢恫吓。
他
很喜欢恫吓。
也喜欢挑逗啊。
对，他喜欢挑逗。我们现在还是不可以说好好。
没有，他喜欢伸舌头挑逗人啊。
伸舌头，
真的。
伸舌头挑逗人。伸舌头挑，暂停哦。它是绿色的，会伸舌头挑逗人。
感觉上，哎呦，
绿色的。
挑逗可能是我个人观感。
那个 X 战警。
in the yellow corner, with a massive 55 amp rating and sporting an STM32 F411 processor clocked at an impressive 100 MHz, representing BL Heli 32 and manufactured by Diatone, the Diatone Mamba F55 Pro 128K. In the blue corner, with a more modest 30 amp rating and sporting an EFM8 8-bit processor clocked at only 25 MHz, representing Blue Jay and manufactured by Chaos, the Chaos BL Heli S 30 amp ESC. Who will win? There's only one way to find out. Let's get ready to thrust test. Hi there everyone. What is the best ESC firmware? Is it BL Heli 32 or is it Blue Jay running on a BL Heli S ESC? And whichever you're running, whether it's BL Heli 32 or Blue Jay, what are the best settings to get the maximum acceleration and deceleration out of the motor and the maximum efficiency for the longest flight times? These are big questions, and that's what I'm going to be tackling in this video. I've tested Blue Jay, I've tested BL Heli 32 spinning a 2207 motor on a 5-inch prop, and I'm going to share the results with you now, and we're going to find out which one. Was it BL Heli 32 or was it Blue Jay? Let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. So let me take you through the test setup that I'm using to gather this data. This is the Taito Robotics 1585 thrust test stand. You can see that it has a 5 kilogram load cell underneath. That's measuring the thrust of the prop. And then above it there are two 2 kilogram load cells that are measuring the torque that the motor exerts on the prop. Up the front here you can see the optical RPM sensor. And you can see that as the prop spins, that little white stripe that I've painted on the motor is passing the sensor, and that's giving a very accurate reading of the RPM. If we come to the back here, you can see there's this large electronics board. That's measuring the power consumption, the current draw, and the voltage that is being fed to the ESC. So that's giving us all our electrical parameters like power and current and that sort of thing. On the top you can see I've got my BL Heli 32 ESC, I've got my D-Shock control board and the BL Heli S ESC on the top there. So that's what's driving the motor. There's also a 1000 microfarad capacitor here to smooth out any spikes in voltage. To power everything I've got a 6S battery, and that's connected also to my benchtop power supply, so that's keeping it charged up, keeping the voltage constant for the testing. To gather the data that you're going to see in the rest of this video, I performed 2 different types of tests. The first test was a throttle ramp from 0 to 100% throttle over 10 seconds, and then 1 second at full throttle, and then back down to 0 throttle. The second test that I performed was an acceleration test, and here I did a step change from 5.5% throttle, which is a default idle throttle value in Betaflight, up to 50% throttle, and then back down to 5.5%, and I measured the acceleration and deceleration during both of those steps. You'll notice that this is a change from the previous testing where I stepped up to 100% throttle. That's simply because with a larger 2207 motor, the burst current when I stepped to 100% throttle was actually larger than the test stand could measure, and so it threw an error. That's why 50% throttle. Let's start by looking at Blue Jay. Now, I tested all the different PWM frequencies available with Blue Jay, and I tested them all at 15 degrees timing and 9 times ramp-up power. And all 3 PWM frequency options seemed to deliver very similar efficiency on this testing, and I really couldn't split it at all. It was almost identical for this 2207 motor. Looking at the graph, you might be able to say that 48 and 24 kilohertz might even have been slightly more efficient than 96 kilohertz. But really there's not much to split them based on this test. If we look now at PWM frequency versus responsiveness of the motor under acceleration and deceleration, The results we see mirror those that we saw with the previous testing with BL-Heli32 on a 2004 motor. Responsiveness under braking is pretty similar between 24 and 48 kHz, but reduces significantly at 96 kHz. In fact, it's less than half as effective at braking the motor at 96k versus 48k. Responsiveness for acceleration, again, is similar between 24 and 48, with 24 still having a small advantage, but again reduces significantly at 96 kHz. And based on this data, if you're running a 2207 motor on a 5-inch prop, I would not recommend 96 kHz fixed PWM frequency, because the loss of responsiveness is just not worth having, and there's really no gain in efficiency based on my testing. Let's look at timing for BlueJay now. Similar to BL-Heli32, higher timing was less efficient than lower timing, but did produce slightly more thrust, about 20 grams or so. Honestly, I could find negligible difference between 7.5 and 15 degree timing for efficiency. If we look at motor timing versus responsiveness for BlueJay, again we see a trend very similar to what I found in my previous testing with BL-Heli32 on a 2004 motor, with 15 degree timing giving the best motor responsiveness under acceleration and deceleration. Timings higher than 15 degrees or lower than 15 degrees give worse responsiveness under acceleration and slightly worse responsiveness under braking as well. And because of that, I would recommend running 15 degree timing on BlueJay, unless you have issues with desyncs. If you do have issues with desyncs, then push it up to 22.5 degrees, but start with 15. If we look now at ramp-up power versus responsiveness for BlueJay, again we see a curve that's very similar to BL-Heli32, which is that low ramp-up power reduces responsiveness under acceleration, and that once you reach a certain level of ramp-up power, the amount of improvement slows down a lot and everything sort of levels out. I would recommend that 9 times the default is probably the right level, and that was what delivered the best responsiveness in my testing, surprisingly even better than 11 times. Let's look now at BL-Heli32, PWM frequency versus efficiency. Results for the 2207 motor are similar to what I saw for the 2004 motor, with efficiency and maximum thrust and power consumption increasing slightly with PWM frequency. And we can see that the amount of thrust at maximum increases pretty significantly between 16 kHz and 128 kHz. A lot of you wanted me to test 16 kHz to by RPM, and this by RPM feature is only available in the latest 32.8.3 test code. By RPM modulates the PWM frequency to avoid the PWM frequency ever synchronizing with the RPM, the electrical RPM of the motor. If that happens, you can get aliasing effects which can create noise. I found that by RPM performed better than 48 kHz fixed, but not quite as well as 16 to 128 kHz or 128 kHz fixed PWM frequency in terms of efficiency and top end. So looking now at BL-Heli32 PWM frequency versus motor responsiveness, it's a similar story to previous testing, with higher PWM frequency reducing responsiveness. So you see as we go from 16 to 48 to 128k, responsiveness reduces. Here we see the real benefit of variable PWM, because it performs very well here, much better than 48 kHz fixed PWM for both efficiency and responsiveness. 16 kHz to by RPM performs well, but not quite as well as 16 kHz to 128k linear. I think I'm still going to make my recommendations 16 kHz to by RPM to avoid those aliasing issues. But if you try 16 kHz to 128 kHz and you don't have issues, then I would choose that because it is slightly better performing. Let's look at motor timing versus efficiency for BL-Heli32 now. And I couldn't find that efficiency was significantly affected for any timing. Higher timing produced very slightly more thrust, about 20 grams or so, and consumed very slightly more power. But In terms of efficiency, pretty much all the timings are on top of each other on this graph, and I couldn't really split them. If we look at timing versus responsiveness for BL-Heli32, the results are the same as I found with the previous testing on the 2004 motor. Responsiveness is best at 16 degrees of timing and gets slightly worse at higher and lower timings. With the larger 2207 motor, the difference between different timings does seem smaller than for the 2004, and for a 2207, the argument to move to 23 degrees for desync protection is a strong one, but I would still advise you to start with 16 degree timing and only move higher if you have problems, because you do get slightly better performance, slightly better responsiveness at 16 degrees of timing. Ramp up power versus responsiveness for BL-Heli32, the best responsiveness here was achieved at 50% ramp up power and above, and you can see that any less than that and we were seeing a reduction in performance. So that's just something to be aware of. Now that we've looked at all the data, let me show you my best settings for BL-Heli32, my best settings for BlueJay, and then let's pit them against each other head to head and see who comes out on top. Here we have the best settings that I've found for BL-Heli32. We're on the 32.8.3 test code, 16 kHz to by RPM for the PWM, with 16 degree timing and 50% ramp up power. On BlueJay, we're on 0.14 beta with a PWM of 24 kHz, 15 degree timing, and 9 times ramp up power. So first, let's look at BL-Heli32 versus BlueJay on matched settings. We're going to use 48 kHz, 16 or 15 degree timing, and a 50% ramp up power, or 9 times for BlueJay, because that's the default. And we can see here that the winner is BlueJay, with much faster acceleration and slightly faster braking as well. And the efficiency is very, very similar. Maybe a slight edge for BL-Heli32 at the top end, but at maximum throttle, both BL-Heli32 and BlueJay both produce about the same amount of thrust and consume the same amount of power. Okay, so let's look at the best BL-Heli32 settings versus the best BlueJay settings. We can see that BlueJay still has faster acceleration, although now BL-Heli32 pulls ahead with slightly faster braking. And I think that's due to the fact that it's using 16 kHz variable PWM at the low end, and that's giving it an improvement in braking performance. BL-Heli32 also has an improvement in terms of top-end thrust and power, but I wonder how much of that is to do with the 128 kHz PWM frequency that's available on this BL-Heli32 ESC. I don't know how it would perform if it was limited to a maximum of 48 kHz, for example. I imagine not quite as well. So what's the conclusion then? Let me know what you think down in the comments now that you've seen the data, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. It's very close to call. I don't think that there's a really strong advantage for either BlueJay or BL-Heli32 in this testing. And that's not to take anything away from either firmware, because I think they both